is the Tyll Show, Starcom Radio Network, and we do cover every scene in the news about the things that mean the most. Nothing, people in my age bracket really get this. Ellen and I talk about it all the time. I was there for the first Earth Day. I remember when it was being a good conservationist meant that you loved the trees, you were an arborist, right? You loved nature. And now nature and mankind and development are at war for sure. The Industrial Revolution was quite a testing ground. People got pretty ill. The environment got pretty dirty. We started to get engaged, and then it's become a tug of war. Ellen Moyer is a registered professional engineer, I'd like to say. She's a great author. She's got a terrific book, Our Earth, Our Species, Ourselves. She also writes in the Huffington Post, and I'm so glad she does. That's how she came to our attention. I think it's over a year ago. She's a regular on the subject because Ellen does two things. She calms me down. I get very upset about the environment, number one. Number two, she's very rational in her approach to what we can do and what we should do. On this program, she's been a great resource on the water, horrible contamination in Flint, Michigan, on other big issues like GMOs. And she's back on the show today because I think there's a sentiment that's gathering that says, could we finally talk about why all these ice packs are breaking up at the poles of the globe, starting to float our way? Something's going on. And we take a look at the big picture with Ellen Moyer today on the Ed Tyll Show, Starcom Radio Network. You are a joy to be able to have on the show. Thank you for coming back on.
Oh, thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Where do we begin?
It certainly is exciting, Harvey and now Irma, and they're both record-breaking storms. Irma was blowing so hard that it broke the anemometer, which is what measures wind speed. So, we're going off the charts with our events now, and, we've all seen on TV just the tragic loss and the amount of suffering, and, at least 38 people dead from Harvey last I heard, and that, it's probably gone up since then. 100,000 homes destroyed or damaged. We're talking catastrophe here, but people aren't making the connection strongly enough. So could I just mention a few things about why climate change leads to more grief?
Yes.
Okay, well, it's really common sense. There's nothing mysterious about it, and if anybody tries to confuse you with the tales of it's not climate change, you can just set that aside because, heat is energy. So if we heat up our environment, we're putting more energy into it. And when there's more energy in the weather, there's more intensity to our storms. Also, when you heat things up, water evaporates. We all know this when we, make coffee or tea. The water boils and you see steam come out of the kettle. Well, that's because there's more evaporation when you heat things up. When there's more evaporation, you're going to get more moisture in the atmosphere, and so you're going to get more rain. You're going to get more rain in a short period of time. And then the third, just common sense mechanism is when you heat things up, I guess there's two more. When you heat things up, when you heat up the water, it expands. When you heat things, they expand, they get bigger. So that causes the sea level to rise. And then the fourth thing that wasn't even on my list is that when you heat things up, ice melts. And so when ice melts, it also causes sea level to rise. So all these mechanisms that are completely straightforward lead to more damage when we have a storm. It's said that half of the storm surge in the Harvey case, half a foot of that was from just regular old sea level rise. And that extra half foot, well, that's going to spread it's going to expand the footprint of the damaged area. And some houses that wouldn't have been flooded otherwise became flooded, and then houses that were flooded worse. In Superstorm Sandy, they quantified this. They said, okay, 1 foot of the 12-foot storm surge was due to just sea level rise, and that expanded the footprint of the damaged area and intensified the amount of damage. So there are other, factors that entered into all the damage that occurred due to Harvey, but clearly climate change is something that makes things worse. We can't say that the storm wouldn't have happened at all without climate change, but I think we can safely say that it was worse than it would have been without climate change. So we can really do some things to mitigate and reduce the amount of suffering and loss, and just shelling out mountains and mountains and mountains of money every time to get back to where we were. I mean, what a way to live. It's so miserable. I'm hearing that Harvey could cost $200 billion to address. Well, I thought it would be fun to take $200 billion and divide it by the typical cost for rooftop solar for a house, which is something like $15,000.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if we instead could have used that money for rooftop solar, which lessens climate change, well, that would have taken care of 13 million homes. And that's more than 10% of all the homes in the United States. Mm. So I point that out to just illustrate just the amount of money
right.
that we're pouring into this. I mean, setting aside the misery, the pain, the death, it's just becoming a bad way to go, to just keep reacting and mopping up and mopping up, and things just get worse over time.
Right.
Now I'm hearing that Irma's the worst hurricane they've seen in that area or something like that. So
right. No,
a lot of it could be avoided.
I hear you. Let me, this is going to be, as you know, extremely controversial, but how much of it do you think is valid when I present? Had to be the 1980s, the first time I saw coverage of this in the mainstream media. And I believe it was ABC News 2020 that did one of those, substantial reports on the homes that were sliding off the mountainsides in California, and the others that were built on the ocean on those stilts and did not make it in a given season, and was all about whether or not these people should be insured when you live in an area that has a history of this. And in California, I'm sure you've got burn areas. They go, this is where we always have fires. This is where we always have. So we do have an idea of when these 10-year events, 25, 50, 100-year events have happened. We do know the affected area. Now, there's the controversy. Do you think I'm going to move my house and change my style of life for the one time that this happens? Ellen, you and I know they stay and refuse evacuation every storm. There's always somebody over 50. I'm not getting out. If this is the way I go, then this is the way I go. I'll be right here. So there is a thing where humans want what is in a perilous location, then gather
Yeah.
in a perilous location and go, now you must bail me out. I have no food. My kids are wet at the shelter. Wow. Holy Toledo. You went there. You know it. Now, again, I'm just making the point. We know where this stuff is. We have 100-year maps. Okay. So how much do we really want to be responsible? When it doesn't clash with our earthly desires. Our financial budget makes me. I'm poor. That's why I live here. I'm poor. I'm
it's a
Cajun.
whole
I'm
continuum,
Cajun. I'm
really.
Cajun. That's why I live here. But you're underwater. I know, but I'm Cajun. 5 generations of my. So this I think has to be factored in. You're right. I don't want to get off the thing. Climate change is showing us the magnification of previous events. Isn't that what we're seeing now? Hurricanes aren't new. The intensity is new. The snowfalls.
The intensity is ramping up.
Correct.
Correct. And now, it costs somebody $30,000 a year to get flood insurance in Houston. Go. I'm sure it varies, but that's one number I heard.
Right.
There are a lot of. It's a multi-dimensional problem, like most of these big ones are.
Yep.
But some places just are not buildable. Like if you had a sand dune right on the ocean and the sand dunes are constantly shifting and changing, you're not going to build a house on a sand dune, okay?
Right.
And they're not going to let you build a house on a sand dune. So that's one extreme, right? But there are, we're not going to say you can't live in the Houston area because it's flood prone. But what can be done, can be done is what has been done. I think with Superstorm Sandy, people would get some money, whether it was insurance money or I'm not sure exactly where the money came from. I thought it was insurance money. They would get the money to rebuild, but only with the condition that they raise their structure in the rebuild to be several feet higher, so that next time around they won't get wiped out again and come looking for more money again. So that can be done. Florida, after Hurricane Andrew, they tightened up their building codes and made it and required more out of building design to make the buildings more able to withstand greater storms. So there are things we can do, but the overall trend is not good because we're just making things worse and worse, and we're going to have to keep chasing with our
You're right.
building codes and insurance.
Absolutely.
And insurance companies are not going to keep insuring people and then lose money. Oh, no. They're going to keep increasing the cost of the insurance or saying, hey, we're not giving you insurance. So
well, exactly. That's the problem, right? It's a business. It's not philanthropy. Right. So that's the problem with that. We're using, a profit motive device, right? And that means not everybody gets it. It's profit motive. By definition, it's not universal, right? I mean, that's what we do. Let me just try one other big subject and have you look at it from the standpoint of where we're at right now. You said a moment ago, and it's true, right? The creation of heat is what this is all about. Everything goes from there. We're populating at the highest numbers, and there's no end in sight. The human population is going to continue to explode. The American lifestyle has slowed down its birth rate. You have certain birth rates that are not moving, but in the third world, Mexico, it's a birth rate is monster. It's coming. So aren't all the humans inevitably going to consume? In other words, if there's a right amount of consumption on planet Earth which doesn't destroy it because it's restored as we consume it, right? A balance is maintained. It does seem a surge in humanity that's not middle-class humanity, but it's going to be a surge in need, sanitation, shelter, food, disposal, all that's going to happen at once. won't the human race eventually make it impossible for us to do what the book is calling for us to do, which is have balance between the earth, the species, and ourselves? Because the numbers. Are we up against a numbers game? There's going to be so much heat. Those babies are going to be born. Those humans are going to be there. They're going to need to eat. And there you go. You're off to the races.
Well, actually, we there are things we can do for sure.
Great.
Like in your question is the built-in assumption that the population will continue to expand and there's nothing we can do about it. However, Newsweek did a study recently, and they looked at this. And in 2012, they said the world population grew by 80 million people. And they said also in 2012, the number of unintended pregnancies also was 80 million people. So they concluded that if you provided access to modern contraception to people who want it, these unintended pregnancies could be avoided and the population would stabilize. And this would reduce global carbon emissions by 8 to 15%. So Newsweek's study said that, hey, we can do something. We can stabilize the population.
Oh, well, I think that's a little bit right. I get it. Right, that's an intellectual jump with no grounding in reality. We don't know. I mean, look, to be honest with Newsweek, just dump the condoms like you did in 1985 over America's cities. You can't tell me the world doesn't know what a condom is. So dump them, and then, got to watch out with that Newsweek analysis. It's we can't presume. I don't think we can. Yeah, I just want to say I don't want to start presuming what the third world would do if only the first world would ship its goods. That's not the history of the world. They're going to have to dig out on their own. We can't say we are going to fix every corner of the. That's not. Go ahead.
Okay, I said one of my 3 points on this, so
yes.
Let me say the other two.
You got it. Give me two more.
Because it's not simplistic. Like, there's never one
that
magic bullet.
That sounded insultingly simplistic from Newsweek, not you. But Newsweek ought to be ashamed of itself. What we know about the countries and peoples of the world in my 60 years of living and 40 years of journalism, that's very insulting. But that's okay. It's what they do. This is how the media gets dialogue.
I'm boiling down their long article to a soundbite, so you can blame it on me.
Okay, all right, we get that. We'll blame the editor. Go ahead.
But that's just part one. Part two is well documented that when women their status is raised and they are allowed to have education and start businesses and not be just under the thumb of males, they opt to have fewer children. So that raising the status of women
they'll have
would
to kill the man,
help.
I guess. Yeah. All right.
No,
listen,
you don't have to kill anybody.
You know what? Honestly, I don't want. It's not picking on you. This is the second topic today where everybody's a victim. Women didn't fight and take it. Women can't keep saying, "Look what I didn't get." People who keep saying, "Look what I didn't get," I think are doomed to failure. I think that's got to stop. Look what I didn't get. Look what I didn't get. Look what they didn't give me. This guy was on before doing this about baseball. Baseball has conspired to keep women out for 100 years. And I was like, you must be kidding. I've been at the ballpark 60 years. It never even occurred to us. And I think, this is the same thing. Poor women as a whole, as a gender, in 3.5 billion. No.
Well,
it's a
I'm talking more about like in developed countries where a lot of girls don't go to school because they have to spend like all day walking to get water, and that is a really big problem. So if we part of raising the status of women could be developing water supplies so that they don't have. So that they can go to school rather than, spend 6 hours a day walking just to get water.
Sure.
And that is a real thing, by the way. And it affects women in many countries. And, I'm not saying it's a victim
It does.
thing
It does sound a
necessarily.
little bit like that.
It's
Yeah, I
a
get it. I
it's
get
a
it. But there is a thing about men wouldn't let me. You got to buy a gun, honey. That's how the man got it from the other man. That's how the man got it. The man took a gun, shot the other guy in 1600, 1400, in 900. This is, it's a little bit, but I mean, I do feel for the sentiment. I don't want people feeling they screwed me. I would have gotten what I wanted if it wasn't for them. They did this to me. That's a little bit rough on working people, but I do feel an obligation to do something
well,
about that feeling that people have, even if they're wrong, even if they sound codependent and weak, even if that sounds like a
okay.
horrible admission that you can't do it without somebody's permission. That I have to let go of that. But you got to remember, people who do have something, who fought for it, it's a little bit irritating how other people are saying, well, I wasn't allowed to play baseball, or I wasn't allowed to drive a cab. Did you fight for it? Where was your American Revolution? Where's your Antietam? Where's your hiding to kill the British? I don't recognize women's history in killing. And they got to, use, it's horrible because we're dividing the country. We're saying, you know why I have a problem? Because of you guys. You gave me the
I was
problem.
thinking you were talking about third world
Yes.
countries where the population is
Yes.
increasing. So I was talking more about that. And, I have kind of a problem with what you just said because
I know, because it's
how
a
would you
victim
extend that
mentality. It's
to
just victim.
slaveholders
They
and
right, same
slaves
thing. I have a
back
problem.
then?
I got a
It's
problem
their
with that too. Right, you're right. We all have a problem with the people who let themselves be slaves. Did not die blowing up, stabbing the master. Then you say, oh, you kept me safe, but you didn't stab the master. You weren't willing to die for your freedom, so now the people who took it from you are the problem. No, it's planet Earth. The bugs are going to fight over a piece of candy. This is what it is. So it's tough. Believe me, my heart breaks that people have convinced themselves that they're too weak to get it on their own. That you have to give it to me. That hurts me. Because a generation was disabled by that. Generation of talent has gone to waste because somebody said to them, you need to do it their way. You don't. You need to go get it. And then once you got it, then you're in charge of what's going on. But it's tough. It's tough because,
I think some people are pretty much enslaved, and it's harder for them. And actually, that's one reason I'm so outspoken, because I know that I can be, and I'm free.
Right.
But I also realize that a lot of people really can't, or they would get killed, and they do get killed.
But that's how we got ours. They can't be soft. If you want what we have, you have to do that. That's the point. That's the whole point. You got
that kind of gets into a whole other question, because I think the whole nonviolent approach could be valid and could be effective. And, do we really have to do it the guy way with someone stabbing the other person in the back?
You're right. Maybe
or
less
is
bloodshed.
there an alternative approach that also could be effective? So,
even the atoms have to bash each other to get the change to happen. Nowhere in the universe does change really marry up when it's pointed out. There's
I don't know if they bash each other. I think
they got to explode. I mean, you got this.
I'm
thinking of the hydrogen bomb in North Korea. I mean, that's what they're doing. You make a better bomb when you have more particles exploding, and I think all change, if we're disturbing the stasis or the equilibrium, once you disturb an equilibrium, somebody's getting inconvenienced, somebody's hurt, and I think that this is difficult.
I don't know if you can say that that's always the case. Like, if a caterpillar metamorphosizes into a butterfly, that's not killing anybody. It's just a transformation. There's no violence. That's kind of out of, I don't know. That's a huge question.
It is. I think it.
Do we have to be violent? And I covered that in my book.
We won't. Don't we have to be? Yeah. Right. Don't we have to be honest and know we don't know? We don't know this answer. We're not going to solve the problem why human beings kill, maim. We don't even have a clue. So I think we have to back away. That's, I guess I'm still with your basic theses, right? How do you get the earth, the species, and the selves together here? This is what I've been going after since I was a kid. How does this all thing fit together? There are things which are undermining the success. Absolutely. I mean, we just talked about these people living in Houston, people living in L.A. on mountainsides. They are the villains. They've cost us billions of dollars with their selfishness, their self-absorption. That's what I don't like. I don't like that behavior having to be subsidized, on the climate side. And on the other side, like I said, we got to watch out that we're victimizing, even though we don't intend to. The men wouldn't let us. The men wouldn't let us. Well, from the beginning of time, men have been killing men over that. Oppression, subjugation, taking away your dignity. This is what the history of mankind is, right? I mean, it is.
Well, but also since the beginning of time, people have been cooperating with each other, and that's how we became so successful. So it's really both, actually, Ed. There's competition and cooperation. I mean, humans aren't successful because they're individual people, not involved in groups or anything, going around bashing each other. It's a combination of the competition you described, but also cooperation, living in families, living in bands where they get along and they do group efforts together and get things done that way.
Listen, no argument there. But in order to make a real group, we can't keep whining about who's did this to me.
Yeah,
and I'm sick of it. I'm
one
really
of my
sick of it.
favorite
Yeah,
books
exactly.
I've read
Yes.
lately is Jack Canfield's Success Principles.
Okay.
And he's got tons of them. And
Right.
the first one is take 100% responsibility for your life.
Exactly. Nobody believes that. I don't know a single human being who can do that. That's a platitude. Yes, that's the truth. I know no one. No one.
Oh, I think there are a few.
No one. Come on. I'm
I
on
think
the air
Jack
42.
Canfield does.
Well, I.
Listen to
how whimsical that sounds, though. I know what's going on in somebody else's mind. I know them. Don't worry about what you think. Listen, I love it. I'm all for wherever we can get agreement to get it. I do think we're in an era that is very ill-prepared for tough answers. I just think there's no...
One more thing, though.
Please.
Like I gave you two parts of the answer about the, are we doomed?
Yes.
About how we can
not be doomed.
Help get the birth rate down. But another thing I
Yes.
just don't want to leave without mentioning is that with people who are aspiring to more technology, they don't need to go through the yucky, polluting industrial phase that we went through. They can go right to solar, right to greener ways of doing things if we help that process along. So, it's of course a huge challenge, but there's a lot we can do, and there's a lot of pent-up demand out there. I mean, people don't want to have their house flooded or, be worried about their children's future. So I think there is motivation to solve these problems, and I really think they can be solved, but it requires people to take responsibility, as we've been saying, and be creative. Use some of our cleverness for living more harmoniously rather than just, taking what we want, making a mess, sticking it to the next generation, stabbing the other person in the back. I just know lots of people personally who are doing really good things towards solutions, and I'm sure you do too. You never hear about them on the news, though, do you? You only hear about...
Listen, the news, I'm no fan of what they pick, but the public doesn't really have an appetite, doesn't get excited over somebody doing the right thing. The public does get excited when it's a 15-car crack up on Labor Day and there's two severed heads in the road. So that appetite does tell you about the person who has the appetite. It does tell you a little. See, this is what my little thing is for 2017. And I realize it comes through in these subjects with you today and the previous guest. I think it's time to start looking at the public's lack of sincerity. This blessing of the public is sickening. The public has not done the right thing in the last 50 years. And Houston reminds me of it. Katrina reminded me. I lived in New Orleans. I know why they like it. You still can't have it. I don't care what you like and want. You can't have it. And that's something the public never does to itself. And I think we should start castigating the public. Stop patting it on the head. Point out what consumption demands have been ruinous. Focus in on who's ruining. Focus in on who's paying. That, I think, would reorganize the priorities to include the people who are fed up with this idea that every time somebody wants something, they go insane until they get it. They make it a civil right in order to have it. And the no has to come back into the dictionary. The word no with silencio after it. Not 5 hours of listening to why you're unhappy about no, but there's got to be some no's. Or you're going to break everything, I think. I think that's the theory, yeah.
And, we almost always come to this point in our conversation where we say, humans have to ramp it up here. And we need to become bigger than we are now. And, nobody likes the R word, responsibility.
They hate it. They hate it because it's never there. It's never them.
We are responsible for leaving this place better than we found it for future generations. And we're also responsible to previous generations who sacrificed like crazy so we could be here. So there is an element of sloth, I think.
Amen. All right.
Out there.
We are on the same page. That's me. I am Ed Tyll, anti-sloth, all the way down to grade school kids. I love yelling at kids for being lazy. I think it's the most valuable use of your voice ever. They should be scared. They should wake up afraid in the morning to pull them back from the ledge. I love having you on.
It is crazy, isn't it? So many kids are coddled now, and their mothers and fathers have their cell phone by their side on every moment of the day, just in case their kid needs something.
Terrible.
You're having dinner with someone, and they have their phone right in your face, just in case their kid wants to know where their blankie is or something.
Absolutely. Oh, yeah. No, you are spot. You know what? We should really bring this up earlier the next time we visit, because I do think they're the building blocks of change. I do. I mean, they're micro experiences, but they do show us, as a civil engineer, I know that a structure appeals to you. That to understand a structure, to see a structure, am I right? Civil engineering does the thing work? Right. And I want it to work, and I'm not even a civil engineer. And I want it to work. So I think this is what we need. I think we need reinforcements on America's social engineering. I think we're losing it, and it's hard to get. It's easy to get. It's easy to get sympathy in a moment. It's almost impossible to change behavior outside of a crisis.
Oh, yeah. We'll forget about Harvey in probably a week, unless except for people who are directly impacted by it. And that damage will still be unfolding. But, right alongside with responsibility and sloth and everything, I think a big problem today is that people don't feel good. They feel like they're not very good, and they're not very powerful, and they're frazzled and everything like that.
Right.
So I don't think that simply berating people is going to do much, because they already feel like crap.
Right, but I don't know if they're hearing enough that they did it. That's the message, that they did it. They broke it. They chose everything they've wanted over the last 30 years, not a desire that people have to change my weight, my this, I mean, our superficiality and its demands have been a flood. So I love saying, look what you did do. Look what you did. Yeah, because maybe you have to be the ones that people talk about as the worst generation. Maybe it's time to say, here's a worse generation. There was a best one in front of you. You are the worst. You've had the most, accomplished the less.
It does feel like we've been cruising, doesn't it?
Yes.
We've been cruising for a couple decades and just hoping for the best.
My examples of that cruising are the iPhone and the Facebook are the two biggest economic juggernauts. And one is a web page and one is a phone I already had. So that does tell me what my country's doing, to go nuts over those two things because they're, dawdling. They both are about dawdling. If you wanted a phone call in 1991, there was no Mark Zuckerberg. I used to get my calls on my little Motorola with my little baby, and I was doing fine. I had a phone. That was it. End of discussion. Oh, no. No, Ed. There's billions and billions and billions of dollars we can take out of working people's hands. We will have them paying $1,000. And you go, you must be out of your mind. And then what do? You get on the subway like I did the other day in Manhattan, and everybody who looked like they were struggling financially had an iPhone. Everybody struggling had this thing. And I was like, I have a $49 updated LG phone I love. $49. It does everything. I got the Chrome browser. I got everything on a $50 phone. Yeah. So I say, well, this is going to can come up. No good can come from this. If this is where we're headed,
here's the sobering part. People are not happy. So it's not as if they're being slothful and just partying and having a great time. The World Health Organization says that depression is the biggest cause of disability worldwide.
Wow.
And then if you look at the statistics of people taking medication for depression and ADD and so many other things, it's really sad because, because it's not like people are just living high off the hog and having a great time.
And look at that, and look at all that lost enterprise from them. Had they been let, this is another great subject. You should just be my co-host once in a while. And then
let's do it.
Let's do it. Everything that comes up, I will bring up to you, and I will raise the questions with you, and then we will go on and settle every single item. But I will mention this for a future dialogue.
Let's do.
Yeah, let's do this, because here's one I would love to chat with you about. I come out of a really tough, poor, working-class neighborhood, and what got us out were the nuclear family strength. Divorces, terrible. Stayed together, awesome. Grades off a divorced household, plummeting. Grades off of mommy really loves daddy. They really hug. They don't fight all the time. They're not. So the absence of the modern problems of that was the only thing we had back then. Keep that family together. You guys better stay close. You better love each other because you're all each other's got. And we're done with that. They're getting, it's scrambled and scattered now. And that's where I think they got all of the topics that we mentioned before. Are you working for something good? Are you hardworking? Are you hopeful? All of that used to manufacture at the kitchen table. You can't do it with strangers. Can't do it with strangers. You can't. They are not living so you can live. In the old days, we live, put food on this table so you can live. We are a unit. This is not you, your brother, and your sister, and me, and your mother. That's not who this is. This is a collective. Yeah. Yeah, and it's, tough. When you have none of that, then you go out in the world, and then you need everything that we're talking about. You need judgment. You need wisdom. Where are you going to get that? Oh, gosh, I love having you on. All right, so that's what we'll do one day. We're going to do every single topic that I love because you're
right,
great.
Around the world.
That's it. Around the world with Ellen Moyer, and it will be a better world when we return. There's no doubt going around the world with you would make the place a better globe. All right, Ellen Moyer, one of our favorite guests, absolutely. Registered professional engineer, BA in anthropology. That ought to tell you something. When an engineer is willing to understand anthropology, then we're getting somewhere. I'm a big believer. The book is Our Earth, Our Species, Ourselves. It is the third book from our guest, and the subtitle is How to Thrive While Creating a Sustainable World. The book is available on Amazon. Ellen is frequently, you can read her in the Huffington Post, and frequently a guest on our show because she's a national treasure. I don't think I've left anything out, have I, on that?
Oh, can we just say my website?
Oh, please. Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah, it's www.ellenmoyer, PhD, that's ELLENMOYER, PhD.com.
Perfect. EllenMoyerPhD.com, just the way it sounds. EllenMoyerPhD.com. Have a lovely. How's your weather today? What are you having up there?
It's raining. It's nice.
Oh,
I like rain.
You like the rain? Well, you should come here for a while because it's been raining all year. It rained all year. It rained all through the spring, and it's raining all through the summer. And I just got back from visiting one of our affiliate stations in Florida. And I said, oh, boy, wait till I get down there. I'll do 2 minutes of work, and I'll be on the beach every minute drinking pina coladas. So I got there, and it rained first 5 days I was in town. 5 days in a row. Yeah, and now they're getting socked. I hope they're going to dodge.
At least you got out before the hurricane.
I know. I'm worried about. We have stations up and down that Atlantic coast. I am so worried about them now. I'm just going to keep saying they're going to be okay. There are variables to this storm path, so we're going to cross our fingers on that. All right. Yeah. Well, you're lovely to be so indulgent of my questions. No one indulges me like you do. Thank you so much, Ellen.
You always bring up challenging questions, so it's good to discuss them.
It really is. You make it good. You make it a learning experience for us. All right. Well, have a great rest of the day. Enjoy the rain in lovely. Where are you? What town are you in? You're in Northern California, right?
I'm in Western Massachusetts.
Wow, I had that
called Montgomery, Massachusetts.
I had that way wrong. So you're really a coastal neighbor. You're just up the road a piece in Massachusetts.
Yeah, just up. Yeah.
Super duper.
All right. A little bit.
So love knowing that you're nearby, and we will have you back again many, many times. Thanks for your time today, though.
Oh, thank you, Ed. It's always a blast, and I look forward to next time.
You bet. Same here. Ellen Moyer on the environment. Her book is Our Earth, Our Species, Ourselves, How to Thrive While Creating a Sustainable World. The book is available on Amazon. It is her third book. Ellen is also a regular contributor to the Huffington Post.
Working class in a place they call the Bronx. Learned on the corner about the school of hard knocks. Found out his rap could be his salvation. Well, now he's talking all across the nation. It's the Tyll Show. It's the Tyll Show. Come on, everybody. It's Ed Tyll. Now that you tuned him in, you know.
This next topic has been a topic on the show. Believe it or not, this is going to stagger some people. Ed, are you really that old? Yeah, 1983. we began supporting local agencies trying to fight homelessness. Many of Americans' veterans sleep on the sidewalk at night. Our next guest will talk about the Nylon Project, which is giving a face to homelessness throughout the fashion, entertainment, and celebrity world. The official launch took place this past February and was very successful, with Christina Milian, Jenny Farley, and many others who walked the runway as ambassadors for the project. They're now launching the first book on behalf of the Nylon Project entitled #It Can Be You. Welcome to Jordana, and let me pronounce this correctly, Jamares. Wow, how did I do with that? How did I do with that pronunciation? We got a bad connection there? All right, let's try again. Let's see what we got. Oh, man, huh? Come on, everybody. It's Ed Tyll.
At the tone, please record. When you have finished recording, you may hang
Jordana.
up or press 1 for more options.
Madness. I mean, people are getting ravished out there.
This is the Ed Tyll Show.
The Ed Tyll Show.
Come on, everybody, Ed Tyll, Ed Tyll. Come on, everybody, Ed Tyll. Come on, everybody. Come on, everybody. Come on, everybody. Come on, everybody. Come on, everybody, Ed Tyll. Come on, everybody, Ed Tyll. You may not like what he has to say, but he's gonna say it anyway. He's Ed Tyll. Come on, everybody, Ed Tyll. Come on, everybody, Ed Tyll, Ed Tyll. He's the baddest cat around. Got that shot on his tongue in this whole damn town. Ed Tyll, Ed Tyll, Ed Tyll. All the news and storylines to all the main events. He's a voice in the wilderness that doesn't make any sense. He's Ed Tyll. The voice on the radio, sending out the truth to those who don't know. If you can't see your world out there, you better watch out. Ed Tyll will strip you bare. He's Ed Tyll.
is the Tyll Show, Starcom Radio Network. Our next guest has written a provocative book, and we will go one-on-one for the entire hour, uninterrupted. Charles Sasser is our guest. Crushing the Collective is the book. The last chance to keep America free and self-governing. Stand by. Can America still govern itself?
Grew up working class in a place they call the Bronx. Learned on the corner about the school of hard knocks. Found out his rap could be his salvation. Well, now he's talking all across the nation. It's the Ed Tyll Show. It's the Ed Tyll Show. Come on, everybody. It's Ed Tyll.
Our guest is a full-time freelance writer, journalist, and photographer, a veteran of both the U.S. Navy and Army Special Forces and the Green Berets. He is retired after 29 years of active and reserve service. A former combat correspondent, served 14 years as a police officer in Miami and Tulsa, Oklahoma, where he was a homicide detective. He's an author of more than 60 published books. Charles Sasser is our guest on the Ed Tyll Show. Starcom Radio Network, AM/FM stations all across America. Hey, Charles, welcome to the show. How are you?
Yeah, fine, thank you. You Mr. Teal?
I am.
Hi. Well, it's good to know you. Hi.
You got it. Good to know you, too. So, before we get to the book, you have an incredible background. So let's fill in a little bit, get to know you a little bit. Special Forces, Green Beret, homicide detective. Wow. Talk about those experiences and how they inform your work.
Well, I think both things. Let's talk about, the Special Forces, the Green Berets, of course. And I think you become familiar with kind of the underside of the world. You begin to see, because we were covert missions, and you can see how politics eventually ends up in the gutter if you're not careful. And then somebody has to come along and take it out of the gutter.
You got
that's
it.
kind of what we did.
This is, just on that point, if I may, I just want to connect what we're doing to the last 2 hours on the show. This is a major thesis of mine, and you have just put it out there, and I think this is worth exploring a little bit. You did say eventually it'll wind up in the gutter, right?
Right.
Right. This is tough in all areas to conquer in society. Human nature is flawed. Anybody can go bad or do evil. That's a human reality. This trick of self-government is trying to get all of our good urges together and repress or whatever, suppress the bad things. But this is the balance at the center of whether we can get this done, whether the great experiment of self-determination and self-government is in fact possible. No one's really had it to the level we do. Jury is not back on this, whether mankind can in fact succeed with this experiment. What do you think?
Well, Mr. Till, I know where this is heading. As a historian, I know where we're heading. But you see, it has been this way for a long time. Throughout history, from the very early, man has evolved away from the individual and toward the collective. Collective being that the group is worth much more than the individual. We see, all the tyrants in the world have voiced that. And so we evolve away from the individual. And what we see is the freest people on earth were the early pastoral peoples. You lived in a village. You didn't like the way things go. You packed up your club and your atlatl and you moved out to someplace else which was better. But then there comes a time when you can't move out. Of course, we had our ancestors, when we settled the new world. That's what happened to them. They moved out because of what? Because of the repressive collectivism in their old countries. So they moved out to find new countries. So what happens when there is no new countries, no new frontiers to explore? That's when. Do you remember an old movie called The Body Snatchers?
I kind of do, right? Wasn't that Sutherland? Donald Sutherland was in that. Yeah, I do. I have some memory of that.
A sci-fi movie. And so the Body Snatchers, they came in and they took over human beings. Mm-hmm. And they became pod people. In other words, they were subversive within the society because they were letting these foreign entities take over.
Right.
Well, it's been happening here for many years, the same thing. The United States of America has been gradually taken over by pod people. And it's not by... I'm sure you're familiar with Alexander Tytler's tyranny-liberty cycle.
Not at all. So you know what? For everybody listening, just briefly, what is that?
Okay. He says, and if you look at history, this has happened to every society. Mesopotamia, the Greeks, especially Rome, because we always compare that. But he says that every society, every empire goes through the same cycle. First, there's bondage. After collectivism. After collectivism takes over, you have bondage. Then people begin to get this courage to resist. Then they develop spiritual faith, he says. Out of spiritual faith evolves liberty. Okay. And then we begin the downward slope again with abundance. Look at America. We became the richest country ever known in history. And then out of this abundance comes complacency. We say, hey, we deserve this. And then apathy. We don't really take much interest in, if things are always going to be this way as long as we get free stuff. Then we're back to dependency again. We become dependent upon government, and we look at our government now. We've got, 47% of us are on government largesse in one form or another. And then we're back to bondage. So that's what we do then.
Well, I would love to challenge that anything is so inevitable. That sounds way too certain for anybody to believe is true. But I'm sure he's strongly convicted in his opinion. That's fine. Okay. But, all right, so I thought we were going after the question of, let's see, why the individual will be any more virtuous than the collective. You said earlier, I think I know where you're going with this. That's where I was going. Once humans are involved, then automatically deception, theft, threat, and self-defense. That seems to me to be undeniable. Now, do you think another path?
Yeah, yes. And I think we took the path in the 1700s, with Washington and Jefferson and so forth. We said that our rights were evolved from God, not from man. And that was a big step. That was a very big step, that they were certain natural rights. And then we developed a republican form of government in which the people had control over their government. Because government has control over the people, then you moving toward tyranny. That's the problem. When you have a big government that gets bigger and bigger, and it takes over the rights of the people, the natural rights of the people, where the individual no longer counts without society, then you're on your way. And is the individual any better? No, like you said. Each of us is flawed.
Right.
Each of us is flawed.
Equally, right?
That's why we have law. And that's why law must be fair and impartial.
Right. And also why the law changes constantly. So there's really very few laws when you get down to the real meaning of the word. You have a lot of temporary rules. 50 years, 100 years get changed. But it is tough to come up with a long list of enduring laws that have been fairly applied. That seems to be difficult to come up with when you think about it. Yeah. Where are there no exceptions? And, where is it that wealth doesn't buy your way out? Where is it that poverty doesn't mean you wind up in a worse situation. If it's just deprivation of goods and services, that's one thing. But you don't have the freedom. You don't have the liberty that wealth gives you. This is the society we built. It was built to favor wealth, right? Wealth is a reward for succeeding. Poverty is when you get an F in capitalism, you're poor, right?
Yes, but the problem there, Mr. Till,
right,
is you think laws are hard to make. Well, all of Western civilization, the law and most of Western civilization has been based on the Ten Commandments.
Boom, there you go. Right, there you go. So really, you see, I think this illustrates the point, right? We have a very small list of things we actually agree on. We have volumes and volumes for all the things we don't agree on. Right. And what we don't agree on look like the enduring conflicts.
Yeah, I'm not sure they're that enduring. You're talking about wealth and poverty.
Right.
I don't want to. I grew up so poor. Poverty was a step up.
Mm-hmm.
We were migrant farm workers. I'm a Quarter Breed Creek Indian, and my grandma's name was Rachel Sitting Down. And we grew up, as sharecroppers. I grew up in cotton fields. My dad could neither read nor write. We lived in a dirt floor chicken house at one time. We lived in an old barn. I know what poverty is. There was one thing. There's a difference between poverty and spiritual poverty. We were proud people. We were hillbillies in those arts. But we were proud.
I know, but
we
again,
took nothing we didn't earn.
I hate to interrupt, but isn't that what we don't want? We don't want a lot of pride and hubris. Right. You see what I mean? There's two.
Yeah.
And right now, from what my listeners have been telling me over the last 10 years on the air, we seem to be very caught up in this. We seem to be looking for things very much to flatter ourselves and what we do. I don't know that we're very objective or fair about what we're doing, and this is starting to beg this question of whether or not any country can be free and self-governing. Whether that's possible, I think, as I said earlier, the jury's out. We're young. We're not a 700,000-year-old nation. So we're early on. Before we take, what I mean? I personally, it's worked out great for this generation because there's been more modernization, conveniences are at an all-time high. But that's because we're in a self-indulgence era.
You hit that. You hit it right there. Self-indulgence. There's a difference between being proud and being self-indulgent.
Well, I think that's been lost. I don't see much legitimate pride. I see self-indulgence as an orgy in every group. Women, blacks, every group self-identifies an orgy of, look at me, look what happened to me. And I rarely hear a group say, we screwed up. We didn't fight hard enough for ourselves. We surrendered. So, this is troubling sometimes when people step forward and say, geez, we're still not satisfied with the way things are. Well, you're getting what you kind of choose, I think.
Well, this moving toward this, you see, Ms. Tyler, has been going on for Hitler says the average empire lasts about 200 years.
There you go.
And see, we're about 200 years now.
Right on. Good observation.
So he says every one of them. And as a historian, I look at these, and yes, about 200 years, the empire lasts at its height. And then it begins this cycle. Look what's happening now. FDR, for example, and everything goes toward this collective. Now you say, what is fair? What's the alternative? Well, what is the alternative? Do we become completely controlled by government, or do we have that space in there where the individual makes his own personal decisions, as long as it does not affect other people? I know that sounds libertarian, but I'm not quite going that far. But I'm just saying there has to be space for individuals. But we have been moving constantly. Look, FDR, he had kind of a love affair with Stalin, and he called his movement convergence. He believed that the U.S., that capitalism and communism would converge and become a little bit of both, you see. And we have. And then now we hear when President Obama was elected, fundamentally transform the United States of America. Then we hear Hillary says deep-seated cultural codes, religious beliefs, and structural biases have to be changed. So we see this constant movement toward government and collectivism. And if we look at history, we can see how this has begun. And that's why I was talking about the pod people. You see this? I'm sorry. Go ahead. I don't mean to just.
I got you. I got you loud and clear. I guess the tough thing is to see here is what people are choosing has not prepared them to self-govern. They're not good at it. Let me give my evidence. Americans read poorly. You can't be an intelligent citizen with poor reading skills. You can't. They will talk over your head. They will confuse you, and you will have laws and go, I don't know what that law means. That's the public. Now, I love the public. I've been with them all the way. But the ability to self-govern means you must do things. And obligation is a dirty word to people. They don't want to hear it. Look, you hate the politician. You know who they hate? They hate the politicians, the cops, the garbage man, everybody. I got it. So where they're coming from, they don't feel anybody's got a legitimate claim on what's right for them. This is born of their choices. They have moved right. So you know what I mean? It's people are choosing wrong. They should get a bad outcome. We shouldn't try to find a good outcome for bad choices because people are upset. They should lose everything they have and have to fight for it, which is the history of planet Earth, animals, mammals, etc. Okay. Yes. So this is where I think you've got a brilliant question about the last chance to keep America free and self-governing, because it looks like countries can't self-govern. It looks like they can't function without violence and riots and attacks. Okay. So what do we do with them? If it's their last chance, what changes would they have to make so they don't lose their last chance? What do you think?
Okay, let's go back to how this began, how it happened, and like I said, we moved away from the individual toward the collective. In World War I, there was a couple of characters.
If we're going to go over that, then let me just explain to me, why did they lose faith with the individual and adopt the collective as their preference?
That's what I'm going to explain.
Yeah, what did the individuals do to lose these people? Individuals don't have big support. Groups get support.
Yes.
Right. So how did that disengagement happen?
Yes. Okay, let's go back to World War I with the modern change toward collectivism. And there's a couple guys, like Hacks and what was the other guy's name? Anyway, they started a thing called Frankfurt School in Frankfurt, Germany, in right after World War I. They were communists. And of course, we had the rise of fascism under Hitler. There's not a penny's worth of difference between fascism and they're both socialism, and they both lead to the same way. Well, the Frankfurt School, eventually Hitler kicked Frankfurt School out because they were commies and they had internecine warfare between the two. They went to Germany, and they ended up at Columbia University in New York. Right, a guy named Marcuse in the 1960s. He came up with a thing called that. What happens? He says that the United States, Western attitude, will never submit to socialism. Therefore, he said, what happens is we must have a long march to take over the institutions, to destroy the capitalist, the free institutions, and convert them to we call it liberating tolerance, or you might call it at the same time. I call it cultural Marxism. This whole thing about political correctness and all it's actually cultural Marxism. So he said, what we do, we will take over all the institutions in America. We'll take over the courts. We'll take over health care. That's always first. We'll take over the cultural standards. We'll destroy religion. We'll destroy the family. Entertainment will be part of it. Education, the media. We will take over all these things, and America will fall from within. Khrushchev said the same thing, that America will destroy itself. And that's what has happened, all this kind of thing. So we've had psychological conditioning all these years, these pod people in each of our institutions. Let's say people are herd people. They're a herd group. They're like herd animals more than they are individuals for the most part. So they get this idea, this emotional idea that everything's going to be fair, that we should have everything for free. And what happens? You promise, look at Bernie Sanders, I'll give you free education, free. If people think they're getting something free, they say, hey, what the old thing is, you rob from Peter to pay Paul, you can bet on Paul's vote. I was an undercover journalist in Occupy Wall Street in New York. None of the petunias there knew who I was. So I just went around talking to these people. I have never seen such total ignorance in my entire life. And these people from, every place from Yale and Harvard, Columbia, they're from all the Ivy League schools, and they were totally ignorant about such things as what capitalism was, as
well.
History.
See, here's the thing. I think, honestly, I just think that this won't get anybody excited correcting them about history. I think we really need now what is the example to follow. Who's got it right now? Who's got it right? Because I'm with you. I've watched them all. I was, in the 1960s and 70s watching this. This is not new stuff. This is 50 years of decline.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
So, go on. What do we do now? What's the right path? See, here's the Bernie thing. Bernie has won. Bernie has okay. Well, you know what? People are entitled to make the wrong decision under freedom.
Mm-hmm. But if you make those wrong decisions, then you take everybody down.
That's
with you.
tough. The people who were different didn't stand up. It's too late. Bernie won.
Yes.
Bernie won with that crowd. He's got that crowd live. Now, you got to blame his success on the people who didn't stand up, right? The failures of capitalism are disillusioning, as you point out, again, in America, young people. Same thing happened in the 1920s. They started to think, and you and I don't know if they're right. We're hoping that we have it right. Nobody's got this answer because nobody's been to this point of civilization. No one's gotten here yet. Uncharted territory. When you look at the population of the United States, look at our constitutional framework, never has a set of words been challenged by so much humanity because it's not just the number of people. They're Americans. They're ambitious. They have appetites. They believe in themselves getting what I want at the expense of my neighbor. That's my neighbor's problem. I don't need to make sure my neighbor eats. Well, yes, you do. You don't want everybody breaking into your house. You fix it. I'll blow him out with a gun if he comes near my house. Well, so this may not have worked. It's sincere. But I think what your book title is bringing up an important issue, a big issue with me and my listeners. Is this a governable situation anymore? Could Americans have broken their country, enough of them, to keep the decent Americans from getting ahead? And now it's the morass, the decline, and the breakup. Many people say history will show you that because you pointed out before that cycle. What was it? First you struggle, then you get what you want, then you have what you want, then you get lazy, then you let it get taken away. This is the cycle of humanity, right?
Right, exactly. That's what Hitler says, and it's what history shows.
It's in the Bible. Forget Hitler.
Yes.
Long before Hitler, there was a Bible, right? These guys they knew in the beginning. They knew So now you and I are confronted with what is the last chance? What is the actual last chance America has to be a free country, individuals over institutions? What is that chance?
Okay, do you want the sunshine version or do you want the reality version?
You pick and surprise us. Which one do you want to give? What do you think the public needs to hear? Let me ask it this way. Does the public need a pep talk, maybe? instead of an avalanche of what's wrong. Maybe you'd get the public moving with inspiration, which is in short supply today. Very few people are eloquent and uplifting. Now, the last time it came around, it didn't get a good reputation, uplifting. Because uplifting was 8 years of, we didn't like what you did with your uplift. So there's bad uplift out there. You can get people fired up for something that's not very good for you. But the American people that we reach out to, household income $58,000 hasn't budged in a decade. Taxes going up. That person is very open to, this thing doesn't work. It doesn't work. So let's answer their situation going forward. What would work to get America back on track right now with the current status that we have, whether it's Trump or you look at the environment or you look at your local crime, heroin, on all different levels? What do you think would right the course?
Well, there was a columnist for the American Conservative. I think his name was Bill Lind. And he said the only way, Newt Gingrich's come up with this place. He says that we think that the left is losing power, and he said that's not going to happen because once the institutions are taken over, they're not going to be taken back. And we've lost all our institutions, just as Rome did, through pleasure, through entertainment, self-indulgence, religious decay. Look around us, religious decay, taxes, inflation. We're losing history. Not even taught in many colleges anymore. With people wanting to live off everybody else instead of themselves. Right. We've taken away pride. We've taken away independence. He said the only way to defeat this, Bill Lind, was retroculture. He called it retroculture, and I'm not sure if he's right or not, but I think he is. People that we're talking to, guys like me, I'm an old cowboy. I grew up in the hills. Retroculture. I had the opportunity to grow up in probably the best time of America in the 1950s. Before the 1960s. And now I'm living through this decline. But he said retroculture, we must take back, we must adopt, we must adapt and take back our old principles of family, of spiritual, of religion. We must, of individualism, of self-reliance, especially
but see,
self-reliance.
Here's the thing, right? That list is a list of fights. That side that wants to restore has no inspiration. They don't do what Ronald Reagan did. You got to paint a city on a hill that's beautiful. And, there's not one word of beauty or hope that comes out of this litany. That's the problem, I think, with the retro movement. It's not beautiful and inspiring. It's castigating. You did this, you did that, you did this. People don't respond to that. So I think this is what we're missing. There's a gaping hole that goes right in with the iPhone and the Facebook. Yeah. We have lowered America's ability to inspire by deadening it with introspection, navel gazing. We don't have a commanding figure. Well, you need one for a society. Societies don't go without leaders, especially, this is the whole problem, right? It's enormous. It's an enormous society. Well, how could you think you'd get through without a good CEO? So that's what I'm saying. We shouldn't be surprised. And I don't know if retro culture sounds like the right agenda, but I don't know how does it open people up to hope and joy? Because without hope and joy, people turn it off. They know there's a million things wrong. They want to know who's smart enough to see something good and lead us toward it. Who finds, success amidst all of this? So where do we look today? We did have leaders in the past, right?
What you just outlined, Mr. Tyll, is exactly why people, the common people, so many of them voted for Trump because they were looking for what you're describing now. They were looking for hope. They were looking for some kind of inspiration. They were looking. People are searching. They're searching for that. But nobody's evolved. Look, I was in Special Forces when Ronald Reagan was elected.
Right.
And what I saw then suddenly out of that malaise the Jimmy Carter era, out of that malaise.
Mm-hmm.
I saw the city on the hill, and Reagan began to voice what so many people were thinking at the time. Yes, we will have that city on the hill again. Yes, we will be great. He's saying Trump is saying much the same thing, except he's more in the vernacular, like we are. He's more in the vernacular. But that's what they were looking for. And we had 8 years there of what people called hope, that, hey, we're going to be okay. We're going to be okay. And frankly, what followed was people like Clinton, Obama, fundamentally transformed the United States of America. We had all this came. We have this insertion of the pod people in there that take over our cultures. Look at the media, for example. It's been taken over. It's been taken over. Yeah, I know. This is negative. How can I offer something positive out of that?
That's the thing, right? Exactly.
Says
they've been
hating or the other.
Yeah, the media has been a target of hatred since I was a little boy. I think it's easy to blame the media because it's a handful of people who are on camera. But what we haven't done is cut the cord with hanging on their every word. We worship that screen. Whether it's the Powerball, the North Korea, the marriage of Princess Diana, we're hooked on. So, you got to say those people kind of deserve something bad. Look at the way they act and value things. They did this on their own. No collective came in and told them how to devalue marriage and childhood, staying home with kids. That's all gone now. Okay, well, so why shouldn't you collapse? Is the answer. Who wants to save you? What makes this place worth saving? It's a cesspool. Yeah, that's what they're saying. It's a cesspool. You can go to downtown Manhattan, or you can go to downtown Poughkeepsie, or you can go to downtown anywhere and still see crack and firearms. This will be a lifetime. So obviously these cities have chosen to keep their crack and keep their ghetto. You're telling me in 40, 50 years they can't stop it? Nobody believes that. No taxpayer believes that. No taxpayer sees garbage in the streets and says, come on. You can tell me now 40, 50 years? So this looks like somebody failed an exam and now wants a grade adjusted at the end to make me feel better. No, you suck at self-governing. You haven't done it. You didn't stay up with the candidates. You didn't break your corruption. You didn't do anything. So what are you going to get?
We did one thing.
What do we do?
We did one thing.
What do we do?
Turned it cultural collective. We have turned it down into the darkness.
And
what emerges out of that?
Yeah.
Well, Italy emerged out of Rome, but it was never, it's never been like Rome was. It's never been that kind of and Persia. Look at now, we get Iran out of Persia. So you see, we're not. The U.S. is probably always going to be here. But it's not going to be in the same form because we continue to move toward this clique. I wish I could offer the people more. The last chance to have a self-governing society.
Right.
The
what
last
is it?
chance we have is to resist, is to stand up. Like you've got a pair of cojones and say no.
Well, here's the thing, right? In my world, you don't stand up till you got a plan. I don't think anybody does. So I don't really want anybody standing up. Stay down and be quiet until you have a really good plan. I haven't heard any really good plans on peace. I haven't heard any good plans on environment. I haven't heard any good plans on any major divisive issue, poverty, etc. It's been a losing ball game for 50 years. So to think, oh, my God, they have a chance. How could they have a chance? They threw their chances away. Threw away their families, threw away their identities. Everybody's something special now today, and nobody's qualified to do the self-governing that we think is preeminent. You and I think, believe self-government is preeminent over any other way. What did Churchill say? Democracy is terrible, except when you compare it to everything else.
Yes.
We get it. So that means there should be a lot of failure on our side. This idea we're going to wake up every day and everything's going to be good, we're heading to, that's impossible. We're working with the worst form of government except compared to dictatorship. Mm-hmm. So you still wind up with the question, which I think is beautiful, the title of your book, Crushing the Collective, the Last Chance to Keep America Free and Self-Governing. I think we have to accept intellectually, absolutely self-government might not work. Absolutely, the United States idea might fail. Don't be afraid to say it. Have the cojones to say, well, what could come next? Not so, if it's a nightmare, I don't even want to think about it, then you're doomed if you can't think about it. If you can think about it, then maybe there is hope. That's what I think is great about your book and the question it raises.
Yes. That's the point I'm trying to get across, is that, we had the Great Awakening in the U.S. in the 1890s. We had a reawakening in the 1930s. We had reawakening in the 50s, spiritual reawakening, when people begin to say, hey, there is got to be something better. We've got to maintain. We've got to maintain America.
Right,
we had these great awakenings again and again.
Right. All right, let me come at a different way, but free and self-governing is the issue. Over the weekend, it occurred to me, I was talking to some people, they were doing their Facebook. I was like, oh, my God, I just realized this. Facebook should be broken up. It's a huge monopoly. It's so dominant. It should be broken up immediately. Then I thought, well, what are you saying? Apple and Google have to be broken up immediately. They're doing 95% of the app business. Facebook is doing a predominant amount of the internet traffic. There's your self-government. Break these guys up right now. Make them the enemy.
Okay, how do you break them up?
Well, you got to get on TV. Got to get a lawyer. Got to go to your case law. You got to open up your statute books. You got to start pushing the public to understand it's not allowed to be that big. This is America. It can't be that big. And we've known this. The oil companies were broken up. AT&T was broken up. Can't be. But for some reason, worship of money, I'm sure, is the answer. No one will go in a room and yell at Tim Cook. No one goes in a room, yells at Zuckerberg, says, we're angry. Well, there's your inability to self-govern. There's the love affair with the collective. If there was ever a collective in the world, it's Facebook, right? There's your collective. They love it. Well, what are we going to do? When self-determination is going toward the collective, how do we dislodge them? Look at those behemoths, right? If you Google, Apple, Facebook, go ahead. Tell me, what do we do? We're going the wrong way, aren't we?
Well, of course, that's what I tried to. The point I'm trying to make is, yes, we've been going the wrong way since the Frankfurt School.
Well, should we line up all these people? Should we line up these people and say you're the problem? Everybody, why? No. What do you know? Of course they are. They're bad choice. They're bad choice, and they're bad. I know, but you got to be honest. The people who have made these companies, the following, have to have some responsibility.
Yes. Look, 70% of all the knowledge in the world is controlled by Google.
Well, it's not controlled. It's not controlled. They just have a database with it typed in. They don't control. Be careful. They don't control it. They don't control what I think of it. They're not my only means of getting information. So let's not vest them
throughout the world. The world,
right?
They're the source of 70% of all knowledge is contained. But they donate millions to politicians.
Right.
Republicans. Look, America is not going to fall to communism. Let's take that. America, when and if it falls, will fall to fascism, which is government collusion with business. And that we'll see fascism long before we see
Go ahead.
Communism.
Tell me why. Tell me why that is. Why are we more suited for fascism, less suited for communism? Go ahead.
Okay, communism. When in 1917 during the Russian Revolution, Russia was an agrarian society. Now, Marx himself says, the only way that there's two ways that you can bring communism to a country. The first kind is by revolution, but that will only work in an agrarian society that's not industrialized. It will not work in a post-industrial society. Revolution will not. Therefore, you have to take over the institutions. And the institutions, you take over the institution by the pot people. I call them the pot people. And the government becomes in collusion with big business, And that's exactly what Hitler did. He controlled business. He didn't take it over. He just controlled business, what it could do. And we're seeing that more and more. Little things like Chucky Schumer. I think the year before last year, he introduced a bill that would license all journalists through the government, down through bloggers. Well, we know how that worked out in communist China. When it controls now, it definitely controls all media. And I don't want to be negative, and I'm not a negative person by nature. I've just seen too much. But at the same time, Mr. Tyll, I know as a historian, I teach history. I can know as a history. Newt Gingrich says, one or the other must win. One or the other must win. Now, and so which is going to win? Well, if we go with Hitler, we know where we're going. So how can we maintain a self-governing society? First of all, it may be too late. What I have seen through politics, what I have seen through places like Occupy Wall Street, through wars, as a cop in the streets. Look, let's look in the 1960s. This is a perfect example of what has happened. In the 1960s, the beginning of the 1960s, statistically, there was no difference between black communities and white communities. Crime rate was about the same. Out of wedlock was about the same. Employment rate was about the same.
What year?
Of course, we were not guaranteed all these rights. Yeah, but we have to look at what.
What year? What did you say that was?
In the beginning of the 60s.
Okay.
Until 1964, the Civil Rights Act.
But you had lynchings going on back then. I mean, you don't want to just go. You don't want. They call that cherry picking statistics. I mean, the amount of violence at that time was horrible. It just wasn't being reported. So, I don't know. Yeah, I just want to clarify on that one. I don't want to think that you're not using that as an example, the good old days.
No, I'm not as the good old days.
Okay, good.
I lived with a black family one time. I traveled on a motorcycle for a year and lived in a tent, worked odd jobs. I lived with a black family in Mississippi.
Uh-huh.
Now, Papa George and their kids and his wife.
Right.
I lived with him for quite some while, and he says, and this was 1964, and he says, things are changing. Things are changing. It's become Whitey's fault. Everything's become Whitey's fault. And as a result of that, we're oppressed. And what we're getting here is we're taking black people back into slavery by making them dependent upon government.
Yeah, this is, I mean, I got to say to all those guys, that's a little bit of armchair quarterbacking. I mean, yeah, you can't sit there and I think make those statements. I think it's really in the reality day in and day out. I think that there's two big disservices that were done in that era. One is to make it sound like it was all bad, and then the whitewash area effort where it wasn't nearly as bad. So you need to know that. I don't. I think that's a wasted effort. I think it was bad, it was horrible. We look forward. I think we're looking backward maybe too much on that issue. But you wanted to compare it for what reason you wanted to say?
I was a cop in Miami, Florida after I left. And I worked salt and pepper teams, black cop, white cop together in the ghettos.
Mm-hmm.
And then we began to have the real problems that we're having today. I had 3 of my personal friends shot and killed during that time. I mean, there was violence just increased exponentially throughout the black areas. We would uniformed cops. We'd go to the projects and hear these people. They're desperate, older people, ordinary people, good people, honest people. They'd run up and hug us and say, "Please, please, you've got to get rid of these dopers and these thieves. We're afraid to go out of our houses." I saw these things personally as it was happening. I was in the riots in 1968. Had 13 bullet holes in my police car after they were over during when Richard Nixon was like. It's not that I'm not some egghead academic. I've lived all these stuff as special forces, as cop. I've traveled all over the world. I've lived under these things. I was a combat correspondent, and I saw how communism was taking over most of Latin America and the Middle East. I saw these things. And the same thing is happening now here in America because we've become apathetic. We've become dependent upon government.
Mm-hmm. And that's what I mean. You don't think everybody's equally affected by that?
Yes. We all are affected.
All right. So aren't we? So this is my reason for asking. Isn't this society getting the result it should from its behavior?
Yeah, maybe you're right.
Well, I mean, it's logical. It's No, I'm not saying preference. I'm saying logically this makes sense that we would be breaking down. government did not work on that issue you just pointed out. On the biggest issue, slavery, right? Government has failed. Both sides have failed. Both sides are angry. Both sides see no actual solution. So there you go. Self-government did a horrible job on the race issue since the Civil War. It's been a miserable failure. Like, I think we're back to Churchill. The only reason we're using it is the other tools are worse. But we don't have a good tool for government. We don't have a good tool that's healthy for the human race to flourish. We don't have that tool. We have a lousy tool with tools that are worse, is what I think Churchill was trying to say. There is no way to fix humanity, to get these countries straightened out. There's no way to do this. There's no way to organize the world into, hey, you're this. We wish we could. That's what the map is full of, right? It's full of the people who took up arms, right, and forced their wish on their neighbor, got themselves a country. But none of this looks workable. It's not working. And, I guess the thing that I lament, we had a handbook for this. Now the handbook is gone. They've chosen to throw. All right, well, shouldn't they fail then? I mean, isn't that what they get? That's what you get for throwing out the handbook.
Well, that's what Tytler argued. That
you see, I don't think that's very fair. I don't think that's nice. Hitler said a lot of things.
No. Hitler.
You said Hitler said the same thing as I did.
Hitler. Yeah.
Right.
Tyler Hitler. Yeah.
What I'm saying is, I don't think that what I'm saying is like what Hitler was saying.
No, I didn't say it was.
That's where I got confused. Okay, so let's leave Hitler out of it. But let's say...
I'm talking about Hitler, Alexander Hitler.
Right. You mentioned him. I got distracted. I'm talking about today's current problems. Right now, you got the North Korea, you got the Black Lives Matter, you got the unemployment, you've got the $58,000 household hasn't had a raise in 10 years. What does the right path, the last chance, as you call it in the book, require of those people? What do they have to do? They can't just wait for the other people to get in line. They're going to have to do something. There's going to have to be some affirmative offering. What would that be?
Okay, I think it's going to be called tough love. Tough love. Look, we have to make people self-sufficient. Ben Franklin, he preached on this a lot. We have to people be self-sufficient. We have to be independent, and we have to force people.
Well, there you go.
If they're on welfare, let them work for it.
Yeah, there's your failure. There's your failure, I think. I think there's your fascism. Can't force people.
I think that's take it away.
That's fascism. You're forcing.
No, that's not fascism.
It sounds
take
like it.
Well,
maybe I misunderstand the word. How would you force them? You have
take
to force
away
them.
Welfare unless you're willing to work for it to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Take away all the freebies.
Mm-hmm.
70% of our budget now goes to entitlements.
Okay, so what about
everybody's entitled?
Now, what happens when those?
It's going to collapse.
There you go. So, what are we going to do with the bigger riots that this will cause? You just got through mentioning riots. What kind of riots do you expect if a country like ours threw 47% of its population off of assistance and said, you know something, you're not getting this anymore as of next year? What would you expect? Yeah.
Look what happened to Greece, 3 years ago?
Well, never mind Greece. What do you expect for New York, Los Angeles, Chicago, St. Louis? Well, what do you expect? What would you expect?
I expect the same thing that happened in Greece.
Right, but enumerate it. You're not enumerating. I want you to. Can you enumerate it in modern American terms? Go ahead.
This is modern. This is modern terms. This is 3 years ago.
Give me a body count. Give me a death toll on these riots when 47% of the country gets tossed. What do you expect? How many people would you expect? They're saying to me 30-something dead in Houston is a catastrophe. Would you expect more than 30-something dead?
Okay, I expect, look.
No, I'm asking you a point-blank question. Do you expect violence, riots, and death in the street if you kicked 47%? I didn't say I want them on either. I'm asking you what would happen.
I'm telling you what's going to happen both ways.
Tell me.
I'm telling you what's going to happen.
No, I'm just asking you one. I'm not asking you both ways. I'm asking you for a body death count in the big cities I enumerated. Do you have a feel for that?
Yes, I have
Hundreds,
a very good feel
hundreds, thousands. What would you
for it.
expect?
No, it would be thousands, millions.
Thousands.
It could be millions.
Oh my God! So how could we do anything that would
All right.
Yeah, go ahead. That's what I'm worried about.
Let me hit you with another question. Just the opposite of that. If we don't do something, this society is going to collapse economically with a 23.
Well, I don't know. Listen, here's
we're
the
going
thing.
to collapse economically.
Yeah.
And the same thing, maybe even worse, is going to occur. Same thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would rather have the rich people in the street fighting in riots with the poor than just having the poor in the street. If there's a choice between two riots, give me the riot where everybody's affected. No one is safe. That is a productive riot. You give me a riot where it's down in the poor neighborhood that's on fire and you're going to go in there and round them up, then that's fascism. That's what that's going to look like. Yeah, that's what they're going to look like.
During that time, I was a cop in a riot. 13 bullet holes. That was not fascism. People were burning buildings.
No, what I'm saying to you is,
that was not fascism.
No, what I'm saying to you is,
law and order.
If you don't disrupt the entire society, you will make no change, in my opinion, because the riots of the poor have made no change. I have witnessed the riots of the poor. You were in as a police officer. We were the ones threatened. We were the ones you were supposed to protect that day. We were under assault in those riots, and we certainly didn't. Yeah, we certainly didn't do anything to those people. We were just a tiny bit more money in our household than theirs. They were the poorer than the poor, and it went up in flames. So this is what I think brings us back to your title.
Yeah.
I'm certainly unconvinced that this is doable. And blind faith in it, I find insulting. There's absolutely no blind faith, in my opinion, worthy of what's happening in America right now. There's nothing to put faith in.
What would be your solution? What would be your solution?
I guess that's the problem. I don't need one. I could live with the whole damn thing falling apart because Greece and Rome fell also. I have no problem. I'm a Roman Catholic. I believe everybody is born with sin. So there's no virtuous. Well, that means nobody is ever really in it for all the right reasons. So it's gotten enormous. It's gotten diverse. So it makes perfect sense to me it wouldn't work. I don't expect it to work. There's no periodic table of nations that says, ooh, this one will work. We wish it would. And people wish a lot of things. People have a lot of desire, a lot of dreams. Doesn't mean they happen. So it's easy for me to see that it doesn't work out. It's sad, break my heart, but it's not going to be, oh, my God, I can't conceive of it. Of course you can conceive of it. Look at it happening, right? You know the word better than I, right? They use it all the time. Balkanization. Aren't we in an era of, I want to live my life? My life has nothing to do with your life. I want to be separate and apart from you, and I want my ways and culture. I want everything. And for the most part, we don't care about that until the jihad people come, and that they want to name the place in upstate New York Islamburg, and they want to start living like Sharia law, which they do. This goes on. So, if you don't have, I believe, what we lost years ago, I'm not sure we can do it. I mean, I would love to. Believe me, that's why I love having you on. I want to hear about every chance America has to survive, because I think America's in deep trouble.
It's going to resort back to communities, to the community. That's where it will end up.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the communities themselves will band together to survive in all the chaos. They will have to, and that the whole thing depends upon that, and it depends upon those people having courage, having this spiritual commitment to their own community. What we've done is through technology we have essentially scattered the seeds to the wind, so that everybody's in his own little world, and nobody really cares. You don't even know your neighbor. Most people don't.
Well, right. That's a good point. But that was brought up with television in the 50s.
Yeah,
that was the same thing. Yeah, exactly.
Continued.
Yeah, right. Well, what do you make of the Trump refusal? At least, here's where I love him. He just hates convention. So that's good, right? He's a good displacer. He's a good displacer of what was there. But what do you think has to come after him, or what does he have to initiate after you finish cleaning out the refuse? You want to put something in. What do we do after we get rid of the guard, the bloated bureaucracies, and he's fighting with everybody up there about everything? So let's say he thins it down. Let's say he does get some of the bad element out of there, and he's got it thinned down. I'm not still sure what our course is. Do you see one for the United States to be preeminent going forward?
Well, no. Let me tell you. Let's look.
Yeah.
A decline does not occur overnight. You'll have look at a line graph. You'll have the ups, the peaks, and then you'll have the depths again right after that follows it.
Right.
Each time the peak is a little lower and the depth a little deeper. We had Ronald Reagan. There was hope, and then after that it began to go down a little bit up. Now we've got Trump again. The peak is peaking a little bit. But look, here, do I have hope? Only hope I have is in communities. The idea of communities. That's the only thing that's going to work. I have the idea that people must become independent again. They must become self-reliant. And we must begin to teach this in school. But it's not going to happen because these institutions have been taken over. Look, for the last 2 centuries, the whole world, the globe, has depended on Western civilization to stabilize the world. They've depended upon America and Western civilization to stabilize the world. Now look, Europe is lost. Europe is gone, and it's not going to recover. And so now that America is following, destabilized. So now we have the whole world being destabilized because there's no stabilizing influence in the globe. And as a result of that, we got North Korea threatening, to blow up the world, essentially. We got Iran in cahoots, Pakistan, India, Russia, Israel. Look at all the countries that now are getting nuclear weapons, and there's nobody to stabilize this crap. So it's global madness. It's madness on a global scale now. We are living in the most precarious times in global history right now.
Well, see, this is where I'm stuck, right? We're going to look, the people who love community, as you say, right? Mm-hmm. All right. How far before community becomes collective? This is what we started with. America in the 1700s started with communities. Now it's got to be collective. So how do you go and keep a community just the exact right size? Kind of like Goldilocks, right? You don't want it too big. You don't want it too small. You want it just right. These are very interesting calibrations to make with human behavior and human choices.
Okay, let's look.
Yes.
Let's look at American history.
Yeah.
Let's look at American history. We could have said the same. We could and we did say the same thing about, say, Plymouth Rock or Jamestown. We could say the same thing about these people when they left over here. How did you know communism was rife in America at the very beginning, long before 1848 Marx ever rose? Plymouth and Jamestown. Jamestown's the first colony. And they made a pact that everything would be done for a community. In other words, communism. Everything that was grown, everything that was caught, everything that was produced would be divided equally, irregardless of their contribution. 80% of those people starved to death. They resorted to cannibalism. And 80% of them died within the first 2 years. They were eating the dead. They were digging up graves to eat the dead. Until, after 2 years of this, they said, hey, this is not working. So let's give each person his own portion of land, and he'd be responsible for himself and his people, his family.
Right.
Never more did they, one of them made a quote, never more were we lacking. Same thing happened in Plymouth Rock. They were almost on the same verge in Plymouth colony. They were on the same verge of eating their dead until they also said, hey, we can't do this. We have to insert individuality within a government.
Right.
We must govern so that individuals can prosper. I don't want to live in a society.
That's the point. That sounds like I want something that's not doable. That's the point of all of my questions. I'm trying to get to this answer. Who knows the sweet spot? Who knows? That's what I mean. I love all the positive thinking, but we must admit we don't know this, right? We absolutely. Go ahead.
We can know what's going to happen if we're ignorant about the history.
But
if we're ignorant about what's history and we're trying to destroy history now. If we're ignorant about history, we will. The old saying is, we will repeat it, and we have become ignorant about history. History tells us what's happened.
I think that's deceptive. I think you leave out that you have a historical experience, then you have to interpret it for what it means now. I don't think it's an overlay. This happened in 1800. This happened in 1700. Take it, lay it down on 217, and go, there it is. No, I don't believe that's
what I'm saying. But history will give us certain lessons.
Well, the listen
from the Bible. Yeah. Bible is history. We have these lessons all in the Bible.
But man, isn't it? Do you think it's not true that mankind has done best in the emergence of these great civilizations, which were collectives? Rome was a collective, Greece is a collective, America's become a collective. Okay, so that is what in the history of man has gotten man the farthest, correct? All right, then. Well, there you go. So now you can see, I think, why human nature loves a collective. That makes perfect sense.
Love a collective.
No, I think they do. Here's what I think they love. I think they love, and I do too, going to bed at night knowing NORAD has missiles pointed all over the world, and the world's afraid of me. So I probably won't get nuked tonight. I think if I was sleeping in South Korea, I wouldn't be sleeping very well. So I think those are the realities that people face when, in the past, they have collected together, right, around common defense, trade. This is what has brought people together, right? Defense and trade.
Yes.
Okay.
Collective itself is not an evil. Collective itself is not an evil. Republicanism is not an evil, and it's a collective. It's only when you take it to extremes and you take away from the individual his rights, God-given rights, you seize them from the individual, then the collective becomes oppressive. Then the collective becomes tyranny. Right. A collective does not have to be tyrannical.
Here's the thing, right? You and I would have to agree on this. It can feel like tyranny. It doesn't have to be tyranny. It can feel like a stomach ache. It doesn't have to. You know what I mean? We gotta say we don't have to feel great about everything in order to be happy and to be free. I don't have to feel awesome about everything. We should be tolerant of, I can live with that. You know, I hate that. But for the greater good of the things I do love, I put up with that thing I hate. That's where I think we're completely ill-equipped today. I think today is different than a previous generation was willing to take some pain for the greater good. The greater good today is, you must see this, is vested in the collective.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's what they chose. This is what they get, right? Shouldn't they get what they chose? We shouldn't save them.
And we've got what we've chosen. That's the problem.
All right, so maybe there is no hero.
Look,
maybe there's no superhero.
You know, I was in Vietnam a couple of years ago,
right.
A couple of years back, and I saw what happened to Vietnam after that. You know, people living in fear, but you don't see it until you talk to the people. I have friends.
Right.
You talk to the people. It's this fear that you don't want to live in, the fear that you can't speak out. And we can't, realize we're 46 in the world right now in freedom of press and freedom of speech, primarily because of political correctness and self-censorship. Nobody will stand up and say, hey, the emperor's wearing no clothes. None of us will say that anymore because we're afraid of being called a racist or so forth and so on.
Well, look, you know what? I don't know. I don't want to think this is good, but the Nazis weren't afraid to go get a permit, were they? For all the oppression and political correctness, the most heinous group that I know, actively spewing their hatred, they were able to get a permit. And, this is a part of the burden we have with the First Amendment. Bad people, awful people, are elevated and given marches. One of the first things I did on the air 100 years ago, it feels like, was a Skokie march in Skokie, Illinois, of the Nazis.
Right.
Okay, well, this is who we are. We welcome Nazis with permits. We don't go, as a society, we hate you, and even though we have to give you a permit, we hate you, we don't want you to be here, we want you to know we don't. That's not what we do. We go, here's your permit. So you get what you deserve, I think, in this world. I think I'm still a believer in physics. If the nuclear reaction or the chemical reaction comes back to you and makes your life worse, you made a mistake, is what I think. So it's tough. It's very tough right now to see how we could pull out of this. What do you expect after Trump? What's the next kind of chapter going to be?
He will not finish the second term. That we're going to have a silent coup. We'll have a coup of one form or another before his second term. Yes.
Really?
And after that, I mean, there's too much. I mean, the institutions like Newt Gingrich said, one or the other will have to win, and there's no taking back this power.
But who says that? I mean, that sounds so silly. That sounds so juvenile. The world is nothing but surprise, revolution, and unexpected. I love him. I've always liked. He's a very sincere guy. But that sounds silly. That's not a serious thought. I mean, that's really flat earth thinking, that everything we know is enough to do what we have to do. We're supposed to, if we're intelligent, say, geez, the amount that I don't know could be humongous here. But, if we're simply going to repeat, I don't know if that's human nature. Human nature hasn't really been a carbon copy. It really does change. But so coming after Trump was my question. Do you think this is the upheaval and then there's the refocus?
Then we're downward again, yes. I don't want to be negative, but yes. It's if we look at history, it's going to be it's just too late. Once we get this kind of I call it cultural insanity.
Right.
Going bonkers. Once our society has gone bonkers.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what.
How when we got 50 different genders other than male or female.
Listen,
we're not supposed to find that absurd.
I'm going to tell you something right now. You are going to have to come back on a number of these subjects because you just got into it now. The social engineering we didn't touch on very much. And it is bizarro world out there. So let's do that. You know what? I got somebody. My next guest, you'll probably love the next topic. My next guest is coming on to talk about, do you like the size of Amazon? You got any problem with how big it is?
Yes, I know.
I bet you do. Did you get a little bit concerned when they bought up the Whole Foods?
Well, of course.
All right. Well, my next guest and I are going to go in there with a battle axe and chop that thing up to bits because I'm against all that. But
that's here again. We're talking about an association between government and individuals and corporations, essentially. Amazon, it also contributes to everybody.
No, it doesn't. That's a scam, too. I don't think it does any good at all. I think it's a craven way to do what they did with stereos in the 1970s. They just want to mark it down to put the other guy out. And as soon as they knock out the other guy, they jack up the price. That's what I think Amazon is evil. I love when Trump hits them. I love going after that little bald-headed freak with that Amazon because I don't like it at all. I love you, though. You're a great guest, man. I would love to have a couple of drinks with you. What's your alcohol of choice? What are you, with Jack Daniels, man? What are we drinking?
No, I drink actually green tea.
Green tea? Well, I'm bringing a fifth of early times, and we're going to bury that sucker in the backyard. Charles, thank you for your courtesy, for your knowledge, all of your I appreciate your effort, the intellectual and academic injection we need into the public dialogue. Great job on this today. Congratulations on your book. I can't imagine it's not going to be a runaway bestseller. It's called Crushing the Collective, The Last Chance to Keep America Free and Self-Governing, by our guest, Charles W. Sasser, a full-time writer now, journalist, photographer, but a veteran of the Navy, the Army, Special Forces, and Green Berets, retired after 29 years of active and reserve service, and a former combat correspondent, police officer in Miami, and homicide detective in Tulsa, Oklahoma. You're an American treasure, my friend. Thank you for being with us. Oh, you've also been a rodeo clown, a bronco rider, a professional kickboxer, a skydiver, a scuba diver, a college professor, a newspaperman, and an anthropologist. You are a great American treasure. I already gave you the treasure. Then I added those on. Well, I'll tell you what, we're lucky to have you. I'm so glad you were with us today, Charles.
Thank you so much. You've been very gracious, Mr. Tyll.
It's my pleasure. What is the best way to follow up with you? If people want to say, my God, I heard you on that Ed Tyll Show, where should they go online? Do you have a website you'd like them to?
I do a blog called charlessasser.com.
Perfect. charlessasser.com. We'll watch the blog, and we look forward to having you back on the show. There's so much more for us to talk about.
Thank you, Mr. Tyll.
Thank you, Charles W. Sasser. Go to charlessasser.com. Check out the blog and get the new book. It's out, I believe, on the 12th. Let me get that right. Yeah, comes out on the 12th, so go and get it. Go to the website, www.wndbooks.wnd.com. It's called Crushing the Collective by Charles W. Sasser. All right, we got news, weather, traffic, sports, the latest update on Hurricane Irma straight ahead.
We saw again with Harvey, but they do want to reopen as soon as Monday. But this is the very first time a storm like this is coming through with this specific hospital where we are right now, so they don't know what that damage is going to look like. But lastly, there are two people who live in Florida, people who experienced Hurricane Andrew and people who did not experience Hurricane Andrew. So today,
Grew up working class in a place they call the Bronx. Learned on the corner about the school of hard knocks. Found out his rap could be his salvation. Well, now he's talking all across the nation. It's the Ed Tyll Show. It's the Ed Tyll Show. Come on, everybody. It's Ed Tyll. Now that you tuned him in, you know what I mean. People call him up, discussing every scene. Love him or hate him, he's gonna have his say. He's gonna speak his mind each and every day. It's the Ed Tyll Show. It's the Ed Tyll Show. Come on, everybody. It's Ed Tyll.
Mr. Tyll, do you think it's all just overkill? Do you think that we should chill? Dear Mr. Tyll.
It is the Ed Tyll Show. Patty Lovera is back with us. Nothing good, I think, comes out of one huge business behemoth merging with another to become a bigger business behemoth. It just doesn't sit right with most Americans. They get it. They get it. A giant the size of Amazon, who is now in the food business, is inevitably going to have to be taken apart by antitrust lawsuits, or the consumer suffers, bottom line. This is why you have antitrust, just so that this doesn't happen. Our guest is the Assistant Director of Food and Water Watch. Patty has a bachelor's degree in environmental science from Lehigh, a master's in environmental policy from the University of Michigan. Before joining Food and Water Watch, she was the Deputy Director of the Energy and Environment Program at Public Citizen and a researcher at the Center for Health, Environment, and Justice. Patty Lovera, welcome back to the Ed Tyll Show on Starcom Radio Network. How are you?
Good. Hi. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. It makes me think it's already rigged in that it was allowed to go through. Who is in that department that should have stopped this merger to begin with. I thought we were getting smarter over the last 50 years. But it's government, so you get the lowest brain power for the buck out of a government employee. They're not the smartest. They're never the best in law school. So I assume they suck, and that's why this is going on without a significant antitrust uprising. How did they get this far?
Well, it's a good question. And, we've seen mergers all over the place. I work on food issues, and every step, whether it's the seeds farmers buy, all the way down to the grocery stores where we buy food, but it's happening in banks and communication and, all over the place. We see merger after merger. So there's a lot, and in this particular deal was evaluated by a branch of the federal government called the Federal Trade Commission. And it's rare for them to block a merger. And unfortunately, they didn't block this one. And part of what's going on, sometimes the Department of Justice looks at other deals, depends what the companies do. But part of the problem is that they're using very old, very narrow ways of thinking about what the impacts of these deals are. And they're missing the bigger effect it has when we see companies build a platform across multiple industries and really increase economic power in general. And the way they evaluate it is very tiny, really kind of irrelevant measurements that are easy for the companies to claim out. There's no impact here.
Our guest on Starcom Radio Network, the Ed Tyll Show, is Patty Lovera. We're talking about who wins in the Amazon-Whole Foods merger. All right, so let's go back to basics. What is not supposed to happen because of antitrust? What is antitrust intended to stop?
So it's supposed to prevent an excess of power of any one particular player in a marketplace. And so there's very old laws that do that, and periodically, and we're way overdue for an update on these, periodically there are kind of guidelines that the government would use to say what's too much power. Is it a measurement of market share? You sell too high a percentage of this product. When we looked at this Amazon Whole Foods deal, we're really entering new territory. This is not like we've had plenty of deals before where Albertsons and Safeway merge. Kroger buys a big regional chain like Harris Teeter. We don't like those deals. Unfortunately, most of them have gone through, but it's easier to measure the impact. In a given city, you went from this many grocery stores to this many, right? And you lose competition. What does that mean? Now, when we talk about Amazon, we're talking about the internet, right? So
right.
It's not just about the 400 Whole Foods stores. This is about a company like Amazon that's building a tremendous economic power, really economy-wide. And there's a lot of concerns that as they get more into the food business, which they clearly are doing with this deal, what does it mean for suppliers like farmers, for workers in this food, in that food chain, for customers, if they treat food the way they treated books in their early days, right? If it becomes a loss leader to get you into the Amazon web to buy other stuff.
So does the Justice Department antitrust folks, do they need to be summoned? Or if they can look and go, we're walking in on this. No one asked us to look at it. We saw it just like everybody else. It's a total abuse of power. We're going in and get ready because we think you are we don't have that, do we? Do we have they need to be summoned, or can they go in on just like the Justice Department can go in on their own because they see what's happening in the news?
There's a couple different things that can happen. When a new deal gets announced, Amazon and Whole Foods announce they've made a deal, they have to go, and it depends on the companies in question. Sometimes they go to the Department of Justice, sometimes they go to the Federal Trade Commission, and they basically get a review. And there's a first level of review, and that's really all that this Amazon Whole Foods deal got. They did kind of the bare minimum. It's about 30 days, and at that 30-day point, they can say, we're clearing this, go ahead, finish the deal, or they can say, we're going to do a deeper dive, we're going to do a deeper review. We almost always, groups like ours who are worried about this, we're always urging the agency to do that second review, and in this case, they did not. They essentially rubber stamped this deal at the earliest date.
Now, that's the FTC did, but I'm asking, does the Justice Department antitrust, do they need to be summoned, or can they go in on the way it looks?
They can go in sometimes on conduct, and there have been, and this is not the most transparent process, but there have been instances, in our sphere of looking at food companies, there have been instances where they will look into, is the conduct of this company or in this particular market, for seeds or for fertilizers or something like that? Is there conduct that's happening that's anti-competitive? And it gets very political, whether those investigations get started, whether those investigations get finished. And then sometimes competitors will also make an antitrust claim against each other. They'll say they're doing something that violates the standards of conduct. You can't conduct yourself that way in a marketplace.
So is there a way, in your opinion, for the marketplace to solve it, that there should be anti-Amazon businesses that go after it and target it, and that's the way this should get handled? Because, I don't know, it's very frustrating, right, to have regulators, Federal Trade Commission and antitrust people, if they don't do anything, right? I mean, if they choose to rubber stamp, there should be a backstop. Is it that you have to attack them? Got to go, listen, I love when Trump bashes Bezos because that's a rag now, the Washington Post. It's not a journalism house. Bezos targeting the White House, just like Breitbart is trying to support it. So I think, Bezos and this kind of behavior where you go and buy everything and try to get influence, I think it's a danger on a lot of levels, right? I mean, we don't want our country bought out so that three people decide everything we hear from the news, everything we eat, everything we buy. That can't be good. So what is the way the marketplace, slays this dragon?
It's a good question. I mean, the problem is the bigger some of these companies get, the bigger the dragon gets, who's left to be big enough to slay them? And so we think we need to do both. I mean, we're people who are in this marketplace who see, somebody who gets bigger and bigger and bigger. If they see them acting uncompetitively, they should say so. They should have options to do that. But relying just on that means you're essentially relying on the courts. That's where it's going to get hammered out, and it's not. The truth doesn't always prevail in our court system. They are as influenced by thinking about the impacts of these mergers just like the agencies are. So unfortunately, we have work to do to fix the thinking kind of through the different spheres of government, because it's very, very hard to fix this just consumer by consumer or in the marketplace.
Well,
how do we get these messages out if we don't have media that's neutral enough to get it out there, right? We kind of run into obstacles of this control if we ignore the government piece entirely.
Right. Well, I mean, then it looks pretty bad. I mean, chances are this will stay, right? You don't see anybody really knocking out the merger, do you?
I mean, it's too soon to tell. I mean, we are hearing that Amazon
is anybody powerful
exactly
fighting
sure
it?
Yet what they want to do with Whole Foods.
Right.
They're going to experiment with them. We don't even know what they're going to do with Whole Foods yet.
Beyond Trump, has anybody well-known attacked Amazon for being a monopoly, or is Trump the only one with the guts? Who's got real guts on this issue publicly on the record? I mean, the president's always criticized for being vulgar and coarse. But, I'm from the Bronx. We love that. We think that's an endearing quality because we want guys who fight tough. We want somebody to pull out a knife and stab somebody on our behalf. We're not looking down the dark alleys to make deals. Our deals are you got rid of the threat. So is anybody else upset with Bezos and his move here other than the president? I haven't heard word one. If anybody's alarmed about this. Any famous people? Ralph Nader up on this?
I'm not sure.
Public citizen.
I'm sure he's not happy with it. Whether or not he's
Public
talking about it today, I'm not sure.
There you go.
I've heard some Democrats talking about it.
Well-known, influential ones, or the same old political hacks? Who's a big name that would cut through living rooms and go, oh my God, look who's on our side?
I don't know what you find a big name, but I mean, Keith
you know
Ellison,
what I mean. There's only 3 or 4 that the American people know. Is it Nancy Pelosi? There's a name everybody knows. You know what I mean? Or the big names. It looks like the reason I'm asking is I would imagine all powerful politicians are in on giving Bezos whatever he wants. I can't imagine there's any big name politician or establishment figure who is upended by the horrors of the merger. Did you see any?
We saw some. We've been seeing it in the context more of like we have to deal with mergers all over the place, whether it's banks or communications or whatever. I've definitely seen some Democrats when they were talking this summer. It seems like a long time ago now, but it wasn't that long ago. They were talking about what is their economic plan they're taking to people, this better deal. This deal came up when they were kind of delivering that because it was brand new news, and I think it kind of shocked people to see Amazon getting into the food business in
Right,
this way.
right.
I think you're right that it's not yet a household topic
At all.
We need many more voices talking about it, and I think it's right that
Sure.
when these companies get this big and this powerful, and our economic power translates to political power in our system.
Well, this
right?
is
And
my
we can
next
see
question.
The outcome of
Right.
that.
My next question is, can Amazon buy anyone who's in the way? Who's not for sale that, in your opinion, couldn't be bought? Because it looks like that's the way it works in D.C. You buy anybody. Law firm job, this, your daughter needs an internship. So in that corrupt environment, what's the hope?
I mean, I think the hope is that people are asking these questions of their members, right? So they were just home all summer. They're going to come back soon enough. And I think we need to ask people, do you take money from them? Have you done anything? Are you going to do a hearing on this? Have you talked about it? You need to go on the record on this deal, on other deals, mergers of banks, mergers of communications companies, whatever it is, and get these guys on the record. And if they're not willing to go, that tells you something that you need to remember next election day. I mean, I think it's going to have to be at that level that they don't get much pushback for it.
Well, that's what I'm saying about those senior members. You got to figure Amazon gives a ton of money to our elected officials who don't criticize them, right? How could that not be true? Can't imagine a powerful member of Congress not getting money from Amazon. Now,
I don't have their other numbers in front of me, but they are doing more lobbying. Google is doing more lobbying. All of these companies are doing more lobbying, and they've also, there was a recent expose about whether or not people at a think tank could criticize Google if Google gave that think tank money. I mean, the influence is even beyond the giving, right? It's like Silicon Valley is somehow above criticism, and it's the kind of stuff we have to start putting people on the spot about.
I think all they're doing is the same thing General Motors and Henry Ford did 100 years ago. This is how the game is played. Flood it with cash, and you will get 90% of what you want. Isn't that how America works at that level?
I mean, it's working that way now with our campaign finance system that lets.
Well, I mean,
money
even 100 years ago. But I mean, this is our history.
We do that weight around.
That's it. I mean, it is our history. We do worship wealth. There's no question. And wealth gets you a lot in America. No question about that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So let me ask you about one more that came up. Another one that's kind of a crazy combination, okay? The Amazon with the Whole Foods, some have said, all right, look, you know what? This is yuppies anyway. Poor people can't afford Whole Foods and don't run around with Amazon Prime. So you've got to bear that in mind. Well, I don't think that's dispositive on antitrust, but I think there is a sympathy in the behavior there, that it's not just, foisted on people. They are getting what they want. They are doing what they want. There's a big group that wants all this. This is the way they like it. Can't I just sit and click off on one thing all the time? But we're seeing mergers elsewhere in society, and this is what concerns me. We are losing diversity in media constantly. Are we headed for a same-ism as we go forward? Are we losing our ability to keep viable the public discourse, or do all of these business activities, because they're buried in this amount of cash, they're never going to be scrutinized because the money is too overwhelming? You can't really do anything about that. You got shareholders, you got, people who've invested in the company. So this will constantly be the preeminent now going forward.
Well, that's the concern, right? I mean, that's what we're concerned about. I mean, I spend my days thinking about food, and we see mergers in every step, whether it's the seeds that farmers buy or the grocery stores where we buy the food. But it's happening to banks. It's happening to internet companies and media companies, right? I mean, everywhere. It's merger. I mean, the shareholders drive that because it's not even that these companies aren't making money. They're just not making enough money fast enough, right, for Wall Street. And then, banks on Wall Street make money from doing this deal. Someone made this deal happen, and that made money for some investment bank. So there's a lot of forces driving it. I think what we have to start doing is being more critical. I mean, and we're not going to hear from big concentrated media that big concentrated something else is bad for you. So we're going to have to be better critical thinkers of ourselves. I mean, to take it back to the food examples, we talk a lot about this concept of the illusion of choice, right? We go to a grocery store. There's been, if you go down the cereal aisle, 3 or 4 companies make most of that cereal. Yeah, there's hundreds of brands, most of them bad for you, right? Most of them like candy in a box. But really, are you deciding? That's kind of an illusion of choice because you're deciding from different things that a couple companies make that they just packaged up differently and put a different cartoon character on. So we have to start calling them on that and being clear and being more critical thinkers that we're not getting what we want. This isn't benefiting us, especially if we're talking about options, for media or for doing what you need in whatever part of the economy, and start, making that clearer that we're not just going to accept that this is benefiting us, because it isn't.
Well, do we have people that are at least organized inside government? Do we have a couple of people who are making this argument and are just being drowned out right now and could use more attention and more spotlight?
I mean, I think everybody needs to be asked about it. That's one of the ways that people, shouldn't go years and years without ever being asked a question about what their position is on these mergers. So, the Congress isn't the one that approves the deal, but they can sure shine some light on it. They could have hearings. They could air out, what are we doing? Is this working? What is our process? We're starting to see some people start to talk about it, and they sometimes dip a toe in and talk about what does this mean for jobs. So I think, a lot of people are asking with Amazon and automation, what does this mean if they start getting into the food system? What about people who work in grocery stores? What happens to those jobs? So I think people have to find their angle and be pushed into talking about it. We're seeing a little bit from the Democratic side of people talking about economic power. Senator Warren talks about this. Representative Ellison has talked about this, but more of them need to be. It's a tiny number so far.
Is there an agriculture angle to this with Amazon and Whole Foods? Is this going to come all the way down to the farm? Because that's the biggest thing that's going on in my area, I think all over the country, but we see it everywhere, is locally grown, locally raised, using your farmer's market and all. I mean, are they coming down the road to eat that up too, to Pac-Man at all?
Well, that's a really important question about this deal. So setting aside people, love Whole Foods or they hate them, but they played a unique role for a long time in the places where they operate. They're not everywhere, but in those 400 stores, they had a lot of autonomy in those stores for a long time to go out and find, especially in produce, to find a farmer that's going to deliver tomatoes right to that store. And maybe they're small, but during their season, they can supply 5 Whole Foods with like really fresh local tomatoes. And you don't see that in a lot of other grocery chains, especially national chains. They're doing, a regional distribution center that's serving 5 states. And small farmers can't do that. They don't have that kind of production, right? So they're trapped at that farmer's market level forever, and they can never get into a grocery store because that step is too big, right? And Whole Foods played a unique role for a lot of farmers around in different parts of the country as a first step into stores, into retail. If Amazon blows up organic and natural food that Whole Foods sells at the level they've blown up other products, the volume they need is so big. Are they still going to work with those small guys, or are they going to start having to go to the big farms, in California, in Texas, in Mexico to get the volume they need? And that's a lost opportunity for these smaller local guys.
Patty, you're so good on this subject. It's a tough subject. It's huge. It's humongous. Can we talk for a moment about what Food and Water Watch do? You're assistant director, and I want to give the organization some showcase here, because I think this is the kind of dialogue we could be talking to somebody on the air right now who would love to get involved because of what we've been saying.
Sure. Happy to do that. So, we work on lots of different issues like this. What does it mean that we have this consolidated corporate power in our food supply? We talk a lot about who controls our water supply. Are we going to manage it as a public good, or are we going to let private companies run it? All kinds of examples like that. What is the impact of chasing after fossil fuels having on our food and our water? But the most important thing I think I would say about how we work and what we do is that we're happy to give people information and help people make good decisions about what they buy, where they buy it, food labels. We do that stuff. But we think these are actually problems we have to tackle by making our government do their job and making our elected officials do their job. So we're always looking for opportunities and trying to get those opportunities out there that people can get involved and, ask their member of Congress, what are you going to do when we vote on this issue? Like, to hold them accountable and build the political power. And we need to turn some of this stuff around.
Big time. Big time. And accountability, that may be the one saving grace of like the internet and all this social media, that when it comes to accountability, ordinary people do have tools now, right, to band together and make noise and get their message to coalesce. Patty, it's a pleasure. You're great on this. It's a frustrating subject. It really is, because, striking a balance here, it's hard for an ordinary person to know and understand, but they can feel and sense that something's wrong. And I thank you for shedding some light on it. And we get some people to today take some steps based on it, because it does threaten the direction that we're heading, these mega mergers, right?
Right. And, we talked earlier about wealth and political power. When companies eat each other up, and there's 2 or 3 companies running a whole industry or a whole market, that gives them economic power. But in our political system, that gives them political power, and then they're making the decisions, and we're not. What kind of food is being grown? Is
exactly.
It safe? They're deciding, not us, and so that's one more reason we got to tackle that corporate control.
You bet. Well, you're a good tackler of it, and thank you today for visiting with us and helping us understand it even better. It sounded bad from the moment I heard about it, the merger of Amazon and Whole Foods. Patty Levera is the Assistant Director of Food and Water Watch. Patty has a bachelor's in environmental science, a master's in environmental policy, and before joining Food and Water Watch, Patty was Deputy Director of the Energy and Environment Program at Public Citizen. Wow. That was Ralph Nader was a saint in my household growing up. And I remember when I first heard about Public Citizen, I'm like, oh my God, this guy. Terrific, and the work that they've done over the years, spectacular. So thank you for all that you do, Patty, and we look forward to having you back on the show.
All right, thank you.
You got it. Patty Levera on the Ed Tyll Show. Go to www.foodandwaterwatch.org.
Tyll, do you think it's all just overkill?
It is the Ed Tyll Show, Starcom Radio Network, AM/FM stations all across America. Our next guest, world-class triathlete, cancer and eating disorder survivor, author, and dietitian Karen Newman. Stand by.
Surely a little bit of gratitude is overdue. Go ahead and make 'em furious. Tell 'em where to go. They're only blindly curious to the hell down below, Mr. Tyll.
Karen Newman competes on October 1st at the Aquathon National Championships in Austin, Texas. October 7th, Karen, is the keynote speaker at Luna Fest, which is a women's film festival at Main Street Landing in Burlington, Vermont. By the way, one of my favorite cities. Her book, Just 3 Words, is available at her website, thekaren.newman.com. And by the way, that's Karen, right? Newman. So put a the in front of it. www.thekarennewman.com is the website. Hey, Karen, welcome back to the Ed Tyll Show on Starcom Radio Network. How are you today?
I am doing fantastic. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm so looking forward to this interview. You are an extraordinary example of what you can do no matter what's going on. Let's really make it easy for people to latch on here. These are some of the worst things that ever happened to people, and they happened to you, and not only have you survived, but you've thrived. Before we get into details, what do you want to share with us just about the word impossible, the word, insurmountable? These are not real words, are they?
No, actually, we can turn impossible to I am possible. Anything is possible. I am living proof, and I just want everyone out there to know that no matter what trial they are facing, they can overcome, and they'll find a blessing through it all. I promise every single person that. This is
an unusual phrase, but I so love it. 5 lessons to live by from a one-breasted world record-holding miracle. I'm guessing you're the miracle at the end of that sentence. Losing a breast for many women is about all they can take. What did you extract from your experience that could be shared with others just on that one point? Then we'll talk about the eating disorder part.
Well, Ed, I have learned that we all need to love our scars. They are part of our story. And yes, losing a breast was really difficult, but now I have learned to just love that part of my body. For a long time, I couldn't really even look at that big, huge scar. And it wasn't until one day that I was coaching track, and everything came so clear to me. There was this little girl, Emily, and she came up to me and she said, "Coach Karen, why don't you have a breast?" And I said to her that I had cancer and they had to remove it. And then she said to me, "Well, Coach Karen, do you hate your scar?" What a question from a little 7-year-old. And I said in that moment, "You know what, Emily, I don't hate that scar." And it was that moment that I changed everything around. I said, "I love it. It's part of my story. It tells how courageous I am." And then I said, "You have to love every single thing that's different about you, every scar, embrace it." And for the longest time, she wore a glove on her hand, Ed. And for the very first time, she took it off. And I'm going to cry, but she put her hand in my face and she said, "Coach Karen, I have webbed fingers." And I just hugged her, embraced her. It's the first time. So we need to love our scars. So that's what I've learned. That whatever we've been through, we can learn to rise up and embrace it all.
It's a very basic thing to feel what that little girl was asking you. And it's just as natural to understand your answer to her. How do we get the world to get to that faster? You know what I mean? The youngster is a great unfiltered example, but, we're dealing with a world very, very layered, multi-layered, and sometimes impenetrable on this level. Talk about that a little bit, because I think we could do better in that area as a society.
Do you know what I've learned, Ed, through this is that words are powerful and that we have the opportunity every day to speak life to each other and maybe even more importantly to ourselves. For the longest time, I used to I was bullied and teased. I was dyslexic, all these things as a child. And I learned to cling to all those words, and they soon changed who I was or who I thought I was. And I became stupid and fat and a loser and all of these things. And every day I spoke those words to myself, and it really stole my joy and stole my potential. And so I tell everyone, what are you speaking to yourself, and what are you speaking to others? And do you know that there's a story of this young boy who was going to commit suicide, and he said, I'm going to jump off the San Francisco Bridge if one person on the way to the bridge says hello, I won't do it. Do you know he's out there now telling his story? One person said hello. A hello can change a life. So my encouragement is, what are we speaking to each other and to ourselves?
Got it. Now, these lessons, I want to make them accessible to everyone. So if they haven't been threatened by something like this in their life, can they still use the lessons? I mean, can they still access the lessons that you want to share with them?
Yes, they're universal to us all. Absolutely. You don't have to go through cancer, bulimia, bullying, attempted rape, and all the things that I've been through to learn these lessons. You can learn them right now, and they can empower you. I pray make your life better.
Got it. All right, well, let's start out. What would you, let's order them, put them in the order of easiest for people to understand. What's one of the things that you can see pretty clearly, even if you haven't gone through all this, that you learned?
Well, one of them is something I already just spoke about, words, the power of words in your life. And what are you speaking? You can even just put inspirational affirmations up in your room, and actually they change your cell structure, apparently. Apparently they just help you to heal. So the words you speak are powerful. Put affirmations up. That's something very, very easy to do. And then, do you want me to just keep going on?
Yeah, give me another one. So we got the words, right? That's absolutely a good one. Give me another one. What else did you learn from what you went through that we can use in our lives?
Well, Ed, I've learned that, you know what, we need to allow others to help us. I was so independent. I never, ever let anybody partake in anything in my life. I just figured I could do it all on myself. But you know what? We can't. And when we allow other people to help us, it's a blessing both ways. So, for example, I was going to drive myself to chemo, but my friends actually found out when my chemo day was, and they came over, blocked my driveway, and said, get in the car. And that's the first time I just accepted unconditional love. And honestly, to this day, it changed my life. I could give nothing back. I don't know what it would have been like to go through chemo by myself, but I'm so grateful that I allowed others to help me. And now it's been such a huge blessing. And think about what a blessing it is when you help other people out. So open your heart and let somebody else help you.
Wow. Now that's powerful. Go ahead. What's another one?
The other one I love to say is chase your dreams. Chase your dreams. I don't care what anybody else tells you that you can't do. You can't do this. You can't do that. I want you to just keep on chasing your dreams. And that's what I've done. You know, so many people just, last May I was on a bedpan. My husband had taken me to the emergency room because I collapsed after a race. And that's when they told me that I'm so sorry, there's tumors in your spine and your pelvis. And I had fought to the World Championships. And I said, you know what? I said to the doctor, I'm going to keep my spot on the World Championship team. And he said, well, honey, that's just like impossible. And I said, no, I'm going to do it. I am going to chase that dream, and I am going to get out of this bed, and I'm going to get there. And you know what? I did. And so I just want everyone to keep on chasing their dreams no matter what comes against you, because you can do amazing, amazing things. And we're all so courageous deep down inside.
In the dark moments, when you feel like giving up, do you now look back and see how you didn't or what worked to get you out of that?
Absolutely. I draw on all of my experiences to keep me moving forward. I'm not saying it's easy. It's not easy to keep chasing your dreams, especially when you're knocked down or, or it looks impossible. You know, it took me a really long time to even be able to dress. I had to like pick things up with my toes and things like that. But I've learned, oh my goodness, through this life that we really all have this deep well of courage inside of us, and it really needs to be tapped in order to help us to rise to the next level of our destiny. That's
What is
true.
the Aquathon National Championship? What does that require of you to compete in that?
And this is so much fun. I absolutely love it. It's you run as fast as you can, then you dive into the water, and then you swim, and then you get out and you run as fast as you can. So it's a run and then a swim and then a run. And it's challenging because when you're running, you get all sweaty, and then you got to put your goggles on and they fall off, and you got to dive in the water and try to swim. I just think it's so much fun. It's a really fast race. It's short, and it's just basically, excuse my French, but balls to the wall, all out.
Way to go. October 1st is when it comes up. Then October 7th, you'll be the keynote speaker at LunaFest. Now, before we talk about what your remarks might include, what is LunaFest?
LunaFest is a wonderful program where they have every year they do different women, and they do these empowering, unbelievable stories. And so the movie goes to different places around the country, and they have a big fundraiser for Girls on the Run, and then they do a local one, which will happen to be the Cancer Center at Vermont. And so everybody's encouraged to come and just see these amazing, amazing stories of women who have overcome incredible challenges. So women in prison and women.
Oh, man, sounds great.
And all sorts of stuff.
All right,
It's
so now,
really
as keynote speaker, what is the kernel of the message that you'll bring to them? Because these are going to be highly successful, motivated women, right? These are not people who are saying, come on, get involved. That film festival is going to be full of doers and people that make things happen, right?
Absolutely. So I'll be sharing some of my stories of overcoming things. And these people, all I want to do is bless them. And I want, basically it's going to be the takeaway is that every single person is important in this world. Every single person is vital. And what's key to becoming everything that you were meant to be is to basically step out and use the gifts you were given. So many of us wind up, like you're doing a job that you love and you're so gifted and you have been blessing the world, and I'm so grateful that I'm on your show and that you have all your shows are just so incredibly powerful. But some people wind up in jobs where they don't like it, or they're really not gifted for it. And so one of my encouragements is to really take that leap of faith and follow your gifting. And when you do, you will just change the world, one person at a time or many people at a time. So that's one of my messages, is just have the courage to follow your gifting and do what you are meant to do.
I'm on the website, thekarinnewman.com. For people who are hearing about it for the first time, let's welcome them to your website. What do you have going on there?
Well, I've been blogging, and I just try to write encouraging blogs so that people can just tune in and be blessed, and have some amazing talks that I've given that have been blessing people. So it's just all free. Just come and be blessed. Read some incredible stories. I have, Today's Show I've been on twice, and just different things that will bless people. That's my
You got it. Humor, health, and happiness is what you will find when you are on the website. Karen Newman, inspirational speaker, world-class triathlete, mother, survivor. This is quite a lot for a young one to learn through you. How fascinating has it been to watch your kids look at you and you realize, oh, my God, they're learning from me. I'm hanging on for dear life over here. That's a unique situation, right?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that I was just on the news, and my children, they interviewed them separately, and one of my sons said, I'm so proud of my mom, and that just choked me all up. I'm very blessed with my children. I'm sure every mother and father would say that. but they've learned that they can fall down and rise up. And we've had a lot of challenges with our family. Our youngest son was almost killed in this freak accident where a huge piece of scaffolding fell from 50 feet onto his head. Oh. Our other son struggled with clinical depression, and he rose up. So they've all had these very big issues that they've seen how I've overcome, and that has helped them to overcome some of their great challenges in life. And they're really humble and wonderful, and they know what it's like to give back. So I love that about them.
Oh, my gosh. Karen, you are a national treasure. You're inspiring, you are accomplished, and you're not done. You got a lot more to do. The book is called, and this is terrific, you need to get it immediately, Just 3 Words. It's available at Karen's website, www.the.Karen The dot is very important. www.thekarennewman.com is the website, and we're rooting for you. We'll be thinking about you on the 1st. Then you'll be on the 7th doing your keynote at LunaFest, and we look forward to having you back and talking more about your great triumph and sharing this with people and inspiring people the way you do. Thank you so much, Karen.
Thank you, Ed. God bless you. You're awesome.
So are you. Karen Newman, truly awesome. Go to www.thekarennewman.com. Get the book, Just 3 Words. AM/FM stations all across America on the Starcom Radio Network. Going to update you on news, weather, traffic, sports, also the latest coordinates and path of Hurricane Irma.
supreme, a love 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 supreme.
Mr. Till, do you think it's all just overkill? Do you think that we should chill? Dear Mr. Till, Mr. Till, really no reason to come down on you. Surely a little bit of gratitude is overdue. Go ahead and make 'em furious. Tell 'em where to go. They're only blindly curious. To the hell down below, Mr. Till. We want the glory, but we lack the will. No interest for the earth.
It is the Ed Tyll Show on Starcom Radio Network. Our next guest will talk about how a lack of skilled labor in the construction industry has had an impact on the aftermath of Hurricane Harvey. Wow. Wow. All right, this will be interesting because it brings up the whole immigration thing, man. It's skilled labor. Wow. That's still an issue. We're going to find out what that means. Stand by. Conrad Lazo is about to join us, and with a background in construction law, surety law, and general commercial litigation, our guest has achieved the status of Florida Bar Board Certified Construction Attorney. Mr. Lazo consecutively has been named one of the best lawyers in America since 2010. Wow. Well, we have an expert. We'll find out how there could be, in a country with so much unemployment and so much illegal immigration. I mean, you see these trucks, they come up to the 7-Eleven in, every suburb, I think, has one or two of these sites. They show up at 5 in the morning. They wind up on construction sites. And you go, who are they? They rarely speak English. Deer Park out on Long Island had a horrible episode every morning at 5 a.m. You had all of these illegal immigrants gathering outside of a 7-Eleven and construction trucks pulling up, loading them on there. And you say, well, how did they get away with that? They know better. Well, they will tell you. We can't find workers for these jobs. We need this labor. All right, let's find out what's behind all this. Conrad Lazo is our guest on the Ed Tyll Show, Starcom Radio Network. Hi, Conrad. Mr. Lazo? You did call the wrong number. That's a pretty big buildup for somebody who wasn't there. Okay. All right. Well, you know. You want to try it again? Yeah, let's try one more. Mr. Till, 239. Yeah. 8970. That is what we're doing.
Thank you for calling Martin Diaz. Please hold while I try to connect you.